to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, when we get to you, please introduce the officials who are joining you at the table. My name is David Hanson. I'm the MLA for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul and chair of this committee, and I'll begin with my right.
I'm Shane Getson, MLA for Lexington and Parkland.
Matt Jones, MLA, Calgary Southeast.
Tanny out for McMurray Buffalo.
Cyril Turton, Spruce Grove, Stony Plain.
Good evening, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA, Calgary East.
Pat Rain, MLA, Lesser Slave Lake.
And Miranda Rosen, MLA, Banff Kananaskis.
Is this thing on? Well, if you can.
What was it?
It's the red light.
Yes, Nate Horner, Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development, and joining me at the table, I have to the right of me Shannon Marchand, Deputy Minister, Daryl Dankouse, Assistant Deputy Minister in Financial Services and Senior Financial Officer. To my left, I have Daryl Kay, the CEO of AFSC, and to his left is John Conrad, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Primary Agriculture.
Afternoon, evening, Christina Gray, MLA for Edmonton Millwoods.
Good evening, Heather Sweet, MLA for Edmonton Manning.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Nielsen, MLA for Edmonton Decor.
Drew Barnes, Cypress Medicine Hat.
Warren Huffman, Committee Clerk.
I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. MLA Rosen for MLA Lovely, MLA Jones for MLA Guthrie, and MLA Gray for MLA CC as Deputy Chair. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely are encouraged to have their camera on while speaking and your microphone muted when not speaking. Remote participants who wish to be placed on the speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk. Members in the room are asked to please signal to the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honourable members, the standing orders set out the process for consideration of the main estimates. A total of 3 hours has been scheduled for consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development. Standing Order 59.01-6 establishes the speaking rotation and speaking times. In brief, the Minister or member of the Executive Council acting on the Minister's behalf will have 10 minutes to address the committee. At the conclusion of the Minister's comments, a 60-minute speaking block for the official opposition begins, followed by a 20-minute speaking block for independent members, if any, and then a 20-minute speaking block for the government caucus. Individuals may only speak for up to 10 minutes at a time, but time may be combined between the minister and the member. The rotation of speaking time will then follow the same rotation of the official opposition, independent member, and the government caucus, with individual speaking time set to 5 minutes for both the member and the ministry. These times may be combined, making it a 10-minute block. If members have any questions regarding the speaking times or the rotation, please feel free to send an email or message to the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3 hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose taking a break? Seeing none, we will announce that at the time. Ministry officials may be present and at the discretion of the minister may address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to a microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Excuse me. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the speaking block time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. The vote on the estimates and any amendments will occur in Committee of Supply on March 21st, 2022. Amendments must be in writing and approved by Parliamentary Council prior to the meeting at which they are to be moved. The original amendment is to be deposited with the committee clerk with 20 hard copies. An electronic version of the signed original should be provided to the committee clerk for distribution to committee members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers excuse me, without interruption during estimate debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. I would now invite the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development to begin with your opening remarks. You have 10 minutes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be here and to have this opportunity to introduce the ministry representatives who have joined me here today that I haven't already introduced, other than the people joining me at this table. I have Ken Gosson, the Acting Assistant Deputy Minister of Trade, Investment and Food Safety, Dan Lux, the ADM of Forestry, Katrina Bleachin, Executive Director, Policy Services, Planning and Innovation, Shireen Kaw, Communications Director, Janet Gomez, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Minister, and Steve Lappin, the Chief Financial and Risk Officer for AFSC. Also in attendance from the Minister's office staff, Tim Schultz, my Chief of Staff, Dean Miller, Policy Advisor, Mackenzie Blythe, Press Secretary, and Michaela Jansen, Ministerial Assistant. Thank you all for being here. Budget 2022 does not have significant changes for the ministry as a whole. It provides consistent, sustained funding for growth, diversification, and innovation in our agriculture and forest sectors and the rural economy. The ministry's estimates reflect internal budget reallocations in our programs to align with the budget with existing staffing levels. 2020-2021 was a transitional year. We transferred agricultural research to the new results-driven agricultural research organization and modernized the ministry to improve efficiency. Because of that transition, in many programs, you'll see fluctuations between the 2020-2021 actuals and the 2022-2023 estimates. I'm going to go over some of the highlights for each of the sectors we serve and then delve a little deeper into some specifics for key areas. Budget 2022 reflects our continued implementation of the agri-food sector investment and growth strategy. The strategy has an established target to attract $1.4 billion in new investment and create 2,000 new jobs by 2023-2024. The strategy is focused on growing primary and value-added agricultural production and exports, investment attraction, and job creation. In addition to significant irrigation infrastructure investments, we are attracting new investment and expanding trade in collaboration with Invest Alberta and the province's international offices. Budget 2022 provides $37 million annually to results-driven agriculture research to support research that reflects what farmers are facing in the fields. And for the forest sector, the Forest Jobs Action Plan plays a key role in Alberta's recovery by providing sustainable, long-term fiber access for forest companies. The plan supports reliable, good-paying jobs for hundreds of Albertans while ensuring our forests continue to provide positive benefits for the environment and can be enjoyed by future generations. My ministry is also leading government's work on collaborating on rural economic development. To ensure all regions benefit from Alberta's economic recovery and growth, we continue to engage with rural stakeholders and Indigenous peoples, and we're working on a new rural economic development plan. This budget provides long-term predictable funding in rural Alberta for irrigation districts, $12 million per year in the next 3 years, as well as a $5.9 million in annual funding for the Rural Utilities Program. And AFSC continues to provide much-needed financial relief to producers affected by the 2021 drought, while anticipating that insurance indemnity payouts for 2021 will be one of the highest in AFSC's 80-year history. With record high demand for wood and wood products, forestry continues to be a bright spot in the province, but it doesn't come without its challenges. From mountain pine beetle to wildfire to sub-regional planning, secure fiber access remains a top priority for industry. Increasing fiber access through the Forest Jobs Action Plan will play an important role in Alberta's recovery plan and help maintain the sector's position as a key driver of economic recovery. We're also continuing our efforts to combat the spread of mountain pine beetle and build on the success we've seen in the past few years. We're committed to tackling these issues and supporting forestry jobs while maintaining a world-class sustainable forest management framework. Finally, while it's still too early to predict what the 2022 wildfire season will look like, our priorities remain keeping Albertans, our communities, the environment, and critical infrastructure safe. We're continuing to explore new technology and innovative approaches for wildfire detection and management to determine what tools need to be added to our toolkit. On the agriculture side, there's no shortage of issues being thrown at our primary agriculture sector. Drought conditions have challenged even the most veteran producers across the province. Alberta's government responded and will continue to work with AFSC and other levels of government to make sure farmers and ranchers have the supports they need. We partnered with the federal government to help producers weather last year's drought through agri-recovery. Applications closed at the end of January, and the latest numbers we have show the Canada-Alberta Livestock Feed Assistance Initiative will pay nearly $190 million to livestock producers in Phase 2. As part of Alberta's recovery plan and the Government of Alberta's investment and growth strategy, our ministry has set targets to attract more than $1.4 billion in new investment and create 2,000 new jobs by 2023. Grow primary and value-added agricultural exports to a projected $16 billion by 2023, a 37% growth relative to 2019. In the current year, AFRED is Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development, for the record, is actively facilitating 145 investment projects which have a total potential investment value of more than $5 billion and could lead to the creation of more than 4,000 jobs by the end of 2024-2025. The agri-food investment and growth strategy also sets targets to grow primary agriculture commodity export growth at 7.5% per year and grow value-added agriculture products export growth at 8.5% per year. To support market access for Alberta agri-food products, agriculture specialists are currently located in the Beijing, Seoul, Tokyo, and New Delhi offices. New staff were added to international offices in Mexico and Minneapolis and will be placed in Dusseldorf and Singapore in 2022. This has been an exciting time for irrigation in Alberta. Irrigated land makes up 20% of the agri-food sector's GDP on less than 5% of the province's cultivated land. Irrigation districts are busy with the projects funded by the historic $933 million investment we announced for irrigation modernization and expansion. It's a major investment, the biggest one-time investment in irrigation in our province's history, and a crucial part of our integrated strategy to grow the agri-food sectors and create good jobs in Alberta. As part of that $933 million, just over $116 million in provincial funding will be advanced over the next 3 fiscal years. Our primary agriculture and food and beverage processing sectors employ nearly 60,000 Albertans. We have an aging owner-operator workforce in primary agriculture, but Alberta enjoys one of the highest percentages of female owner-operators at more than 30%, slightly higher than the national average of 28%. Our government recognizes labor challenges in this sector, and we support agriculture education and workforce attraction and retention. Continuing on rural Alberta, we have heard clearly from rural Albertans that unique rural challenges need unique considerations and approaches, different than what's needed in urban settings. So this spring, we're holding another round of engagement sessions to present a draft rural economic development plan, and I'm sure learn even more. There are great opportunities for economic growth and diversification in our rural economy, and we are looking to rural industries and businesses to help lead Alberta's economic recovery. I know that rural Albertans are also impacted by cost of living increases, inflation, and higher utility bills. Our government is acutely aware of this, and our Rural Economic Development Action Plan will be released later this year, outlining concrete actions and initiatives to support sustainable economic growth in rural communities. Alberta's rural utilities are essential for rural and agricultural consumers and businesses. We are continuing the temporary reallocation of $2 million per year from the Irrigation Rehabilitation Program to the Rural Gas Program. We have expanded funding for the Rural Gas Program to support new services and capital improvements, create efficiencies, ensure supply, and support the safe design, construction, and operation of the rural distribution system. Alberta's government will continue to support our province's economic growth and create jobs by ensuring rural Alberta businesses and employers have reliable access to affordable utilities. So, in conclusion, Budget 2022 provides consistent, sustainable funding for growth, diversification, and innovation in our agriculture.
Thank you, Minister. For the hour that follows, members of the official opposition and the Minister may speak. Honourable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block, both in the committee room, up on the wall there, and on Microsoft Teams. Members, would you like to combine your time with the Minister if the Minister is in agreement? Thank you. Go ahead.
I am on. Minister, do you want to finish your comments? You only had a few more left before we
Oh, you're
move
so
on.
kind. Yeah, I was just saying in conclusion, I think this is a positive, sustainable budget for agriculture, forestry, and rural economic development. We're quite confident that with this level of funding, we can continue keeping our staffing levels where they're at and do the jobs we need to do. So we're excited about this budget.
Thank you, Minister, and I appreciate going back and forth. I know our stakeholders too appreciate the fact that you and I are able to have a dialogue and just answer some of the questions. To be open and transparent, many of the questions I will be asking you this evening have come directly from our stakeholders, just more clarity and just understanding of where things are at. So I did ask you about this in question period, tried to kind of give you a heads up that we were going to talk a little bit about AFSC tonight. So I think if we could start there, because that is obviously one of the biggest questions that have come up is the 11% increase in premiums. Now, the concern coming out of that obviously is the fact that there was a 20% decrease that was provided to producers in the last budget. And now, of course, we have an 11% increase. To be clear, it's in Schedule 5, so that we're sticking with the rules. Schedule 5 of the fiscal plan shows the revenue from insurance premiums on crop, hail, and livestock is going to increase from 37 million, so from 322 million to 359 million. This is an 11% increase. Last year, there was a 20% decrease in premiums. Now, of course, we see this 11%. The rationale is that it's due to commodity prices. We clearly discussed this today, that we recognize the commodity prices are increasing, but can you please give a little bit more detail around how the commodity price is being used as the rationale? We know that the price of yield will go up, however, so are the input costs. What is the formula used to determine the increase? Was there not a more sustainable way to look at insurance premiums year over year?
No, and I also appreciate that this is complicated stuff, and it's great to get all the information on the table, and there is a lot of people wondering, so definitely appreciate your approach. So the way the formula works on the premiums on crop insurance, there is a premium rate, and so the 10% increase that you're referring to is one piece of the calculation. So you need to look at the risk area. So there's 22 different crop risk areas spread across the province. So that's one variable. You also have the individual farmer's historical track record. That's another piece of the formula. And then you have the commodity price itself. So those pieces combined give you the total premium. And what we know right now is that we saw nearly, there's a fund that I know you're well aware of members. So there was $3.3 billion sitting in this fund that grows in the years when it's not paid out to pay down the indemnity levels. This year, 2.7 billion of the 3.3 billion was used. So the fund wasn't completely depleted, but there's about 600 million roughly left. The targets that they attempt to reach with the total premium package is around 1 to 1.5 times the premium total. So when you have years where you're depleted and you need to grow the fund, that's where they use the premium rate adjustment. So this year it's a 10% increase because we know we need to grow the fund, and in other years it may be a decrease. The reason it feels so heavy in this year is because the previous minister and the department last year, they did have a 20% premium reduction due to the feeling that the fund was substantial. So this year that is obviously coming back, and with the high commodity prices, it is substantial.
So, Minister, I appreciate that, and I recognize that the premium was provided back. I think if we could look at page 205 of your revenue schedule, which is Schedule 5, page 205 of the fiscal plan, Schedule 5, revenue. Transfers from the Government of Canada for, I'll go to investment income, agriculture, AFFC. 2021-22, it was at 139 million. It's now 113. With a target of going to 126. Can you provide the rationale as what you've just indicated when it comes to looking at increasing premiums? There hasn't been that much of a difference between that and that. Is that going to recover the difference in your investment income? Because it hasn't actually decreased as much as we would anticipate it would have if it had been paid out through the drought fund last season.
Yeah, so the numbers you're referring to simply reflect the depletion of the fund and the trajectory we expect once it grows. There simply isn't as much investment dollars being recouped. But is that answer your question? Or are you asking if it's sustainable with keeping the fund growing?
So what I think the concern is that when we look at the fact that you're saying a 10, I'll say 11% increase in premiums, and part of the rationale is that we need to be looking at the balance sheet for AFSC. We actually haven't seen, even with the $3 billion payout through drought last season, that substantial of a decrease on the budget, on the balance sheet. So my question is with the rationale of having to increase by 11%, where is the rationale in your investment income line item and your premium fees and licensing line item? It doesn't add up to that rationale of trying to recoup.
Well, it does, and I'll find you the numbers here. So this is the investment decrease on the dollars in the fund. The premium rate increase, so the way the premium pot is built, the composition is we obviously have a 60-40 cost share between the two levels of government and the farmer. So we're going to see increases from the federal government, from the provincial government, and increases in the premiums of the farmer. And that growth in the premium account will reach the target that is needed at the 1.5 times.
That's just producers.
Yeah. This is just
but
producers.
if we look at the premium line item then, so I was talking about the investment income, now we go down 2 sections, same page, 205, crop, hail, and livestock insurance premiums. In 2020 it was 319. In 21-22 it's 322 with an estimate of 359. So again, my question around increasing of premiums, can you rationalize why it needs to be a 10%? When in fact, if we look at the numbers haven't shifted that much. And in fact, your estimates are higher for your crop, hail, and livestock premiums.
Yeah, so the premium rate is just one piece of the calculation, and it's expressed from the province, the federal government, and the farmer. So when we're talking about these numbers, what would and I will defer to Daryl here, but I would say that the total expectation in this year is that the premium pool will have around $900 million in it between those three players. And in addition to that, there's the $600 million that was left over from the fund. It wasn't completely depleted. So that gets us to our $1.5 billion target. If that's not clear here, I'll let Daryl explain it in the ledger.
I'm happy to hear, yeah?
Thank you. Happy to discuss. Thanks for the question. Yeah. So, Minister, like he mentioned, the premiums are really reflected in a number of places. The premium line itself is the producer premium we collect. There's the transfers from the federal government for their 36% share. And then there's the Alberta vote, the 24% that they can contribute as well to the premium. So as one of those line items move, all three of those line items will move. And so we make estimates in the budget based on the commodity prices we think we'll see. So a couple different factors. For sure, the premium rates have increased by 10%. We're proud to be able to cap them at 10. I mean, the truth is we depleted a significant portion of our crop fund this year. And the reason we're able to cap it is because both the federal and provincial government take a long-term view of the crop fund, a 25-year view. So we have our main focus is on premium stability. We don't want to see the swings year to year. And so that's why we're able to cap it at 10%. But the other significant piece that the minister mentioned is commodity prices. That's out of our control, clearly. And we're seeing pretty significant swings year over year, and that is driving premiums up.
And Member Sweet, if I could add as well, I think that's another thing that's important to realize is that with the $2.7 billion indemnity payout from last year, almost a third of that was due to the variable price benefit. And so the variable price benefit kicks in when the price changes to the good over the course of the year from the beginning spring price in the favor of the producer. Mm-hmm. So the way it worked last year provided a lot of exposure for the program in a way that this year, when we're starting with high commodity prices, one would think wouldn't be possible unless there's far more room to go. Just wanted to add that. Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate all that. I guess, I mean, following up on the fact that this is a 25-year outlook, the feeling from the producers was that when the 20% reduction occurred, there was hope that it would continue up to 5 years, or there was a commitment there. Part of it is that the 10% increase, although I appreciate that, sounds like the government saying we're not going to increase it past 10%. My understanding is that it's actually in policy and legislation, it can't go past 10%. So it's not that it's we don't want to, it's that you actually cannot do it. And so the 10% I understand. My question again though is, could there not have been a buffer for the premium increases over year, or some way for producers to have some reliability in knowing what their insurance premiums were going to be? We know this year is going to be a hard year when it comes to those upfront inputs, right? Like fertilizer is going through the roof. We know that supply chain issues are a struggle. Fuel costs, all of those things are adding up for producers, and now they have a 10% premium that they have to pay to even get the seed in the ground. So the question is could this not have been forecasted in a way where producers would have predictability in their insurance program and know what it was going to be year after year?
No, good question. I know that there was the conversation that was had from the previous minister with the community was that they definitely hoped they could continue to offer that discount. And it is expensive. Like I'll give you some examples. The 10% won't nearly explain the situation farmers feel. Mm-hmm. Like I'll give you some examples of a average 1,500 acre farm with a common blend of 4 different crops. They would see, so let's say barley, canola, peas, and wheat. Fairly similar acreage amounts. They can expect to see a premium change from last year of 54% when you bring in the 20% reduction that was felt last year. Now that would also come with it a 37% coverage change. So on a farm this size, you would see from 2021 they would go from roughly $33,000 in premium costs to $52,000 in premium costs. Their coverage would jump from $530,000 in coverage to $730,000 in coverage. So the 10% piece of the formula is the only piece that doesn't correspond to the coverage change. And that is the builder of the fund, and it's paid by the federal government, the provincial government, and the farmer. And I would say the 20% that was rolled back, you know, that led to $70 million savings to the farmers in last year, which was also a difficult year. So it's not like it came at no benefit to the farmer in that given year.
Okay, so if we look at page 11 in the business plan under insurance, the question that I have as well, again, I know I'm spending a lot, I will move on eventually, but so 2021 actuals for insurance was 849, let's say 850,000. The budget for 21-22 was 403. Obviously, the forecast, because of the severe drought, was close to 3 billion. And now we've moved it back down for 2022, 2023 to 403. So now we've had 2 consecutive seasons where we've exceeded the 403. I recognize we keep discussing the formula, but I guess my question would be is that we're starting to see a pattern of the fact that insurance is actually exceeding what is being forecasted. That's now 2 consecutive cycles that we've seen this. I didn't actually go back, maybe I should have of 1920. You might know better than me, Minister. But when we continue to forecast and set targets that are not even meeting the historical measures for the last 2 years, can we say that that is good practice in the sense of maybe we should be looking at whether or not those numbers are good targets moving forward?
No, well, point taken. I think I would be hesitant to call 2 years much of a trend per se. You know, these guys have been at this for decades. But I would comment. So if we're talking about the business plan on page 11, so where it shows the 2.8, there's only 2 places in the budget documents where this number is shown. And then we go back to the 403,000, and this is based on historical averages, rolling averages a decade or longer, and based on I guess some history with the federal government as well for how we set this up. But point definitely taken. I guess insurance, much like wildfire, as I'm sure we'll get to later in this. In this estimates, you know, we set our amount, and then we do rely on the contingency funding for fire or the fund in insurance because you simply don't know.
Well, let's move on to contingency then and drought planning. So obviously in the city of Edmonton, it looks like we've had a lot of snow. It looks like we've had a lot of moisture. You go to Red Deer South, probably not as much. There are concerns already around what that moisture level is going to look like for this upcoming year. Recognizing that there is still concern around the moisture levels, what is the department's plan in regards to the nervousness around we might have another drought? We might not even have seed in the ground in regards to some of the very commodities that we're talking about insuring at this point. We've been very reactive in regards to the drought. I would like to know what the plan is, seeing that we're already seeing those indicators.
Yeah, no, good question. I think everybody in the agriculture community is concerned about what this next year is going to bring. We are seeing snow in a lot of the south. We weren't about a month and a half ago, so I know the area I represent's feeling a little better about things, and we are concerned about runoff water and surface water for cattle. What our department's doing about it, I guess to speak broadly, the business risk management programs, they work. This fund did its job. You know, we talk about it being nearly depleted or the number being huge, but it did exactly what it was there for. And we're confident in the formula that we can build it up and do it again. Also, in kind of the same vein, while we're talking about the insurance programs offered by AFSC, we also do have both the MDI insurance, which I know we've discussed before, member, and the satellite coverage insurance. And I'm happy to see that AFSC, brag you up here, Daryl, they went out and they did some engagement in the fall with some of the communities that were most impacted, because I think it's fair to say that the lack of moisture was one thing, but the extreme prolonged heat was another. So the moisture deficiency insurance program specifically, and it's casually referred to as grass insurance in my part of the world, but it only insures against one peril: the amount of moisture that collects on the AFSC's weather stations across the province, government's weather stations. But it doesn't measure grass, it doesn't do grass clippings, it's strictly about moisture. So with this engagement, they made a couple changes that they were able to bring forward in time for this new insurance year. One being that they will no longer measure down to the 1/10 of a millimeter increments. So I know producers were quite happy to see that. They thought that if there was a heavy dew and that kind of thing, that accumulation would add up and they wouldn't put them in a position to trigger a payment. But the others around the heat, and I think that's the most interesting and the people are most excited about. If we have a day that exceeds 30 degrees, the program will subtract 1 millimeter of moisture from your accumulated count. And if you have a day that exceeds 35 degrees, they will subtract an additional 2 millimeters for a total of 3 on that hot day, in hopes that will kind of accommodate and try to cover both things. And I would say that program, the participation is coming up. So as much as vocal as people were, that maybe some didn't think it totally covered their bases last year, there is a desire for it, and I think they've made it better.
No, and I think that's great. I do know, I mean, as we have had discussions around the moisture levels and how, the neighbor can have access to the program and the other neighbor can't, and how frustrating that is for some producers. So I appreciate that. Will that trigger the ability for producers to claim early, or is that just going to be an overarching for the season, and then at the end of the season, it'll be marked?
Insurance?
There's a couple different seasons.
Yeah, so if you're referring to the way the season splits, I think there's 4 choices, A through D, and they can pick the long season, the short season. Do they still have subsoil moisture? There's a few choices they can make that would make the payment come quicker.
Okay.
That's still offered.
So in regards then to the year end and paying out those claims that have been processed, do we know what percentage of the process of claims that have been put forward have been processed, and what the average it was to have a claim processed and payment made to the producer?
And are we speaking about crop insurance specifically?
Yes, please.
Okay, I may have to defer to Daryl. The last I saw that we were keeping up with consistent prior yearly averages, even though there was twice as many claims. But if you want a percentage, I would defer to Daryl.
Thank you for the question. I guess I would start by saying there's an incredible amount of volume this year in our claims. A typical year for us is around 3,500. We will be over 8,000. And so we just kind of crossed over the 7,000 claim mark in terms of adjusting. We are planning to be finished all those claims by the end of March. What I will say, though, is that we were very aggressive in terms of our cash flow this year. We have a number of cash advances that we offer producers. We were issuing those payments early this year because harvest was finished early. Really reached out to all producers to get cash in their hands quickly, even though we knew it was going to take some time. We also added a number of adjusters. We added, I think, over 10 adjusters to bring us to 120 across the province. We move adjusters across the province as we need them to try to work through the backlog. Obviously, an extremely heavy year at AFSC between the drought and the ag recovery delivery, but I think we did a great job responding.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that there were staff that were added to the ministry after we had brought that forward at Stampede, requesting that there be more adjusters in the field to get that process done. If we could maybe look at crop management. So on page 34, line 4.2 of the government estimates document, It states that 3.9 million in funding will be allocated for crop health and assurance. What portion of this estimate is allocated to address the lack of specialists with cropping and environmental stewardship expertise left in the AFRED ministry?
Just bear with us one sec here.
Yeah, sure.
It's for me to support.
So the changes you see in budget is basically to support existing staffing levels after the collective agreement. And then also represents some of the extension that's since moved over to ARDAR and become ARDAR's responsibility.
Okay, so then I guess the question would be around the move to ARDAR. So one of the concerns that come out, it has not come out, has been identified is the need still for extension services and making sure that at the gate, the farmer has access to that expertise and those resources. So if it has become under the responsibility of ARDAR, can you maybe explain to the local producer how they would access that extension service? And then how is that being measured by the ministry, given the fact that ARDAR is actually external to the ministry's work?
No, it's a good question, and I think I would point to the applied research associations. They're spread out across the province. And I think that they provide some kind of boots on the ground connectivity with the farmers in different regions. They are being funded by ARDAR. I know it's been a transition. So the applied research groups, they're trying to learn best how they can work with ARDAR and make sure that they are getting their needs dealt with, and ARDAR is learning more about them as well. But I think that that's a relationship that's really going to flourish. In my area, Cara is in Oyen, represents a huge area, and there I think they need to be a lot of the conscience of research. We have our industry groups that are going to direct their priorities, whether it's from beef or barley or honeybees. They're gonna work as a group to know where they want their research to head. But I think it's also important to have this regional look through the applied research associations that'll push for research. It's different everywhere. If you're arid, if you're wet, if you're irrigated in the south. So I think those lenses are going to be important, and the ag service boards still provide some of that extension as well and liaise between the municipalities.
Okay. Let's actually stick to affordability for a little bit more. I think we've talked about insurance and premiums. Now, I want to discuss a little bit around the natural gas component. So you talked about your rural utilities. Say that 3 times fast. Under rural programming and agricultural societies, we've actually seen a cut in the line item on page 11. Sorry, my apologies. Under expenses, 2021 it was 30. And then we see a forecast which was 56,000, and now it's down to 23. Can you speak a little bit about that cut and what that means for rural programming? And part of that, my understanding was that the rural utilities program also came out of that line item. Am I correct in that?
Can you just give me the page and the line item again?
Yeah,
Apologies.
sure. No, that's okay. Business plan, page 11. It's your lovely.
Page 11.
The page after your outcomes.
Yeah, so the decrease you're seeing on page 11, that's a combination of operating and capital. So the main decrease is because of the completion of the 2 main capital projects. One that was the Lethbridge exhibition hub project, which was quite substantial. It was 18.1 million, and that was completed in 21-22, and a $16.2 million decrease due to the Northern Lights Gas Co-op in Mackenzie County being completed in 21-22. There is some small increases, $500,000 for Kainai Forage, natural gas project, and $500,000 for Medicine Hat Event Center and Grandstand. I would just comment the $500,000 for Medicine Hat, it's still early days. They're still in the engineering and design. And the Kainai project is a much smaller project. That covers 2/3 or 3/4 of the cost, and there's federal cost share in that.
It's like you read my mind. I was going to ask you about Kainai. Okay, so that explains the piece around, what about the egg societies? Because egg societies are funded under that line item as well.
Yeah, the operational funding for ag societies is consistent, maintained at $11.5 million a year, I believe. But the reason that ag society number,
You're looking up, she's looking at a different page.
oh, she's in the business plan? Yeah, it's capital. The operating funding sustained at $11.5 million, and the rest is the capital items I just mentioned.
But the grant funding for the egg society is shifted.
No.
Okay, you should probably clarify that.
Go to page 34, line 2.2, 11,462,000, same as budget 21-22, and the allotments are the same between the regionals and the smaller ag societies.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that came up around utilities and natural gases, again, trying to came on the affordability, is that under the climate leadership plan we had when we were in government, we had a greenhouse natural gas rebate program to support the greenhouse industry when the natural gas prices went up. The policy under the climate leadership plan provided a rebate of up to 80% of the levy. The calculation at 30 tons would have been $3.3 million per year. At 50 ton, the program would cost about $5.5 million. So essentially $1.1 million for every $10 a ton. My question is the government, because I cannot find it in any of the budget items, supporting the greenhouse industry and looking at the affordability components when it comes to natural gas?
There is some programming through the Federation of Gas Co-ops. There's a remote area heating allowance and some other grant programming through them. So we increased their funding to $5.9 million. We moved $2 million over from the irrigation rehabilitation to the gas, what's the line? Rural utilities line. So there is some programming available there. Also, you know, ARDAR has been working with these groups. I'm thinking of the Sunterra greenhouse group and doing joint projects with them and providing funding through that lane.
So at this point, the government has no natural gas rebate for producers in relation to greenhouse production or any of the agriculture production at this point?
Well, we got rid of your carbon tax, so there was no money to go with it.
Oh, you got rid of the carbon tax, so there's no money to invest in agriculture, Minister? Is that what I just heard?
No. I'm saying that your specific carbon levy that you're referring to.
Correct.
Yes.
Was rebated back to the producers.
That's,
So because it's gone out of the province right now and going to the federal government, you don't have that money to rebate back to the producers. Is that what you're saying?
no, I'm saying that the entire carbon tax, whether it's federal or the one you implemented, is punitive and hurtful and targeted to rural communities, to rural agri-value projects, whether you're trying to heat a poultry barn or a hog barn, or pump water for irrigation with natural gas, or any number of these things for which there is no viable alternative. I'm saying that it is punitive.
So it was rebated back to producers. It also put solar. It also helped with the grain dryer program. It also helped with many of the infrastructure development programs that many of the agriculture industry actually accessed.
We support the grain dryers through our CAP grant programs through our department.
Through the federal
Water
program.
efficiency, well, joint, federal, provincial.
Yeah, which is what the carbon tax was getting transferred back into CAP.
Yeah, well, I would point you to the private members bill federally that work to extend and broaden the farm fuel exemption
Yeah, could we talk about the 2022, 2021 Ag and Forestry budget for the province of Alberta?
So if we look at rural programming under line 2.1, including funding to rural utilities, can you break down how much this funding addresses utilities and breaks down the 2021, 2022, and the estimates for 2023? And how much of that is administration costs? And then what is the remaining amount used for what programs and services that are being provided under the rural utilities programming?
The 2022-23 estimate of the 4.8 million includes 1.7 million in staffing, 16 FTEs, 300,000 in supply and services, and 2.8 million in operational grant funding.
Okay, so can you elaborate a little bit more on how this program will help support bring down the cost of living for rural Albertans that are accessing the program?
So there's,
The two big pieces are the, within the rural gas program, to help defray the high cost of constructing natural gas services so that farmers and other rural Albertans may access this basic utility service at an affordable cost. The focus of the program is system expansion and upgrades for the rural domestic and ag consumers, ensuring the continuation and reliability of natural gas supply and infrastructure safety and integrity. Because it's not just about the price and affordability, it's about actually getting it. And, you know, that was some of the issue with the Northern Lights. And the other is the remote area heating allowance to reduce the cost of heating fuels for those Albertans who do not have access to natural gas service. These individuals generally reside in very remote locations in the province.
Okay. Let's go to food and bioprocessing. So key objective 1A on page 9 of the business plan, as well as page 19 of the strategic plan, is to support economic growth and recovery in Alberta. The government has a film and television tax credit in the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program, the APIP, targeted at petrochemical sector. So why is there not a fiscal program to support new investors in other areas such as agriculture or manufacturing? We are losing investment to Saskatchewan due to their value-add agriculture incentive. It's a non-refundable 15% tax rebate on capital expenditures valued at about $10 million or more. The government relies too much, obviously, on the low corporate tax rate, when in fact they could be looking at being comparable to Saskatchewan with their 15% tax rebate on a capital expenditure of $10 million or more. Why is there no support in this budget to level the playing field with Saskatchewan to make Alberta more attractive to this kind of investment?
No, thank you, member. So yes, no, we are competing with Saskatchewan for a great many of these projects, and you know, northwestern states and globally as well. We do believe that Alberta has a broad value proposition. You did mention, you know, not having a sales tax, you know, lowest corporate taxes in all but 6 states in North America. Over Saskatchewan specifically, you know, logistical advantages in distance to the port, other advantages around, you know, city size, having 4 times the population and 2 large centers. So those conversations come up all the time. I would say we do have some tools. It's not that we aren't bringing things to the table. I would look at the investment and growth fund. Obviously, it's not under this department or in these estimates, but some of the work being done at JAI has, well, their first 4 projects were all ag related, and I think that speaks to probably a lot of the great work done by the ag department in years previous. We have ag tracker, and our ag team here, there's 145 different deals on the go representing upwards of $5 billion in investment. And also in budget 22, although not in these estimates, pardon me, Chair, there was the addition of, you know, $5 million to that investment and growth fund in JAI, targeted specifically at projects in rural Alberta. So I think those are all good news things, but I will give you this. I think the department always needs to be looking at where we sit in the competitive landscape with our neighboring provinces. We're happy of the investment we've brought in to date and want to do more, but we're always looking to do better.
So let's talk about those 4 investments that have been through Jobs, Innovation and Trade. Those were CANE partnerships, I believe, with the federal government, and that came out of the CANE funding. Well, how much of that is provincially funded through Ag and Forestry, or is it all through JEI?
All through JEI.
So all through Alberta Innovates. Is there any?
Invest Alberta.
It's I thought it was Alberta Innovates. Okay. Is there any ability to try to leverage that to bring some of that more under agriculture and forestry, to look at some of that more value-added propositioning?
Well, I think the leverage we're providing is the collaboration. You know, we have the team. We have a lot of that institutional knowledge. These people that have been doing this for a long time. We don't want to recreate kingdoms in each department, so it's going to require a lot of collaboration and interministry work. But I think so far we've been successful. It hasn't. We don't have too much time under our belt, but I don't think we want to recreate that here. But will require us to work closely.
So, since we're talking about some other industries, one of the questions that has come up is around being able to recruit, and actually it still comes in under your rural investment strategy model for your business plan. When we're looking at implementing strategic plan, page 18, implementing strategies to develop, grow, and attract investment in key industries such as agri-food sector investment and growth strategy. One of the concerns that has come up from our smaller rural communities is that issue around capital and that being able to do the investment into infrastructure. So whether you mentioned the ACME project, I won't say the name of the business, I'll just say the ACME project.
Yeah.
They ended up putting in all of their utilities, whether that be the water pipeline, the natural gas line, and we're able to do that. Although they're still paying taxes on it, so there's some questions around them putting it in and still paying for the transmission costs. But many investors that want to move into that are local Alberta investors, who are smaller, they're not the Cavendishes of the world, they're smaller Alberta local companies that want to be able to invest in the agri-processing world, don't necessarily have the access to the capital to put that infrastructure in place. The question that I have is that we've seen some cuts in other ministries in regards to, let's say, MSI funding, for example, where that basic infrastructure is needed to build those industrial parks. Are you working with your fellow partners at the cabinet table trying to figure out how to minimize some of those barriers so that we can ensure that we are hitting your priority 2 of growing and attracting investment into the smaller rural communities?
Well, certainly, and you know, I would also, whenever you're talking about access to capital, I think Daryl probably wants to talk too, because AFSC's done some great work on you know, providing more community capital. That we've increased you know, their borrowing limit, and they've increased their lending limit and their small loans and so on and so forth. But when it comes to building infrastructure with partnership with the government, I think you do have to look at rural Alberta very holistically. Like you mentioned the project in ACME, and I would point to, you know, in this budget, once again, not my ministry, the school modernization in ACME that's happening across the street. And I think that speaks to looking at things very broadly at a high level, because another thing that I know Member Gray will probably ask about is labor, and the need for labor in a lot of sectors, but especially we hear about it in agriculture as well, and in rural Alberta as well. So to tie everything together and look at micro-credentialing and building the skills that the kids need in the high school to walk across the street and already have a foot in the door at a good paying job that will then open the door in college or university. You know, that's the kind of infrastructure building that we need to look at in rural Alberta, and you know, we have to decouple some of these needs of the different ministries. But yeah, I'm always having those conversations about what rural Alberta needs.
So I appreciate that, Minister. I think the issue, though, is that, again, on page 18, increase economic development capacity and opportunity of rural communities and improving conditions for ongoing economic success. If the municipalities don't have the ability to create those industrial parks because they don't have the revenue to do it, it does hinder the ongoing economic success of some of those smaller communities, because they don't, like, they want to grow so that they can have more people working and they can have a higher tax base and property taxes and all the things so that they can pay for more infrastructure. But if they don't have it now, what are you doing within your ministry to improve the conditions for ongoing economic success for those smaller communities?
Well, you know, I'd point to the engagement we did in the fall. You know, we did a special round just for those municipal leaders to have conversations like this, and they're well aware that you know, they have a part to play in this as well. You know, we have made it easier for them to offer their own tax incentives. Many are working towards building their own you know, pre-designated industrial areas, and we're using our department to facilitate, you know, discussions between municipalities that might fit with potential projects and players. So it's all collaborative. We're working together, and I can tell you some of the municipal leaders I've met in my short time on this job. They're out closing deals and doing what they can, and on an international level.
Okay, so to continue on with that, if we look at the business plan on page 10, outcome number 2, key objectives 2.4. Support social economic development in rural Alberta by maintaining and enhancing rural infrastructure and realizing new economic opportunities. So again, enhancing rural infrastructure, when we're hearing from smaller municipalities that they don't have the ability to maintain that infrastructure because the municipality has cut the funding, I think there is a significant issue here. But I want to focus on RETAs, Rural Economic Development. Okay, sorry, acronyms. I just want to make sure we all go. So
they're under JEI while we're doing acronyms.
They are under JEI, and I appreciate that. The concern is, though, is that yeah.
Point of order has been noted.
Point of order.
Yeah, 20.B or 20.B, I apologize, I don't have my right in front of me, but we seem to be talking a lot about other ministries trying to get it together, pull it together, so member speaks to matters other than at hand. And I'm very interested in seeing how this weaves together, and member, honestly, I'm wanting to see how the rural economic development comes together too, but we seem to be pretty poignant in other ministries and how they correlate. So I'm just asking if we can kind of keep it over towards that side, that's all.
Go ahead, member.
Thank you. So my colleague has very clearly listed page 10, key objective 2.4, relating this directly to the estimates, and throughout her questioning has linked back to the budget documents for this ministry. So I would suggest it's not a point of order, and I look forward to your ruling, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and I am prepared to rule, and I agree it is not a point of order, more of a matter of debate and overlapping ministries, because I do recognize that as well as agriculture and forestry, it's rural economic development, so those questions kind of fall into that. So I will allow the questions to continue as long as you're referring to
2.4.
budget items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, outcome 2.4. The reason that I want to discuss the RETAs is that this is about rural economic development, which is what RETAs are. And there's been some concern brought forward by some of our rural communities that some of that money's been transferred to urban centers. And because of that transfer to urban centers, the smaller communities are having a hard time being able to do that attraction. So what they're looking for is support in training and understanding and how they can work as hubs, just as you said, like how do we work in those regions to attract that investment into those areas. And so I guess my question again under 2.4, which is about, you know, enhancing rural infrastructure and realizing new economic opportunities, how are you working with those smaller municipalities and developing rural economic strategies that can help them work in collaboration with each other to attract that investment?
No, and thank you for the question. And yes, the REITs are under JEI, but I think they are an important piece to rural Alberta. And in my brief time under the JEI ministry, did get to meet quite a few of the organizations across the province. So I don't mind answering. I don't know the specifics around the dollars moving to the urban setting, but I'll be happy to take that up with the Minister of JEI. But I think once again it comes to collaboration on our end. You know, our forte is ag investment, value added, specifically processing. That's a big piece of the conversations that are being had. But sometimes the REITs will liaise between the municipalities and our department. So it's all helpful. It's a group that's they might have the spot or the opportunity, or they might think that they have two advantages. They don't know how they work, but they know they're good. And so they want to come to us and say, how can we monetize this? Do you know any companies that want to go down this path? Take greenhouse potential and excess heat. If you have some kind of cogeneration facility that a municipality is aware of, they might not know who the right players in the room are, but they know there's going to be a lot of latent free heat that would serve a greenhouse well. So it's those conversations.
Well, thank you, Minister, and I appreciate that. I mean, if you're open to hearing from some of those municipalities that are just looking for that extra support around that training or component, I mean, I can pass them along to you as well. I know they are working with your colleague, but I think sometimes just based on your understanding of the rural economic component, that it might be something where it's nice to have a conversation.
And can I add one more thing?
Of course.
I would just say I think that with this change in Invest Alberta coming in and playing a big part too, that the REITs are still trying to find how they fit and everything. So I think those conversations will continue to be had between us and JEI, but I think there's definitely consensus that they're an asset and in the right places in the province. So.
And I'm sure they'd appreciate that. So if we continue on 2.4, can we chat a little bit about co-ops? So the majority of cooperatives that invest in Alberta take place in our rural towns and countryside. Given that small investment is blocked by the excessive amount of red tape surrounding the creation of new cooperatives, this also goes into your red tape line, I know. What is your ministry doing to open the ability for cooperatives to invest in rural Alberta? There are many examples of cooperatives successfully investing in rural Alberta in the past. The Battle River Railway is the most profitable mile-to-mile track in Alberta thanks to a cooperative model. Yet today, starting a new cooperative can cost an average of about $80,000 for $1 million investment. What is your ministry doing to alleviate the excess red tape surrounding the creation of cooperatives so that they can invest in rural Alberta?
So we are responsible for the rural utilities, so the gas co-ops and the the rural electric or the REAs as well, non-profit co-ops. But I think you're more referring to an investment co-op model.
A grain elevator
Yeah.
or something along that line. Yeah.
We're not responsible for that, I guess, in these estimates. But I do take your point, and I know in our rural engagement it was brought up as a potential investment tool. So I know it's something that we heard in that feedback, and we will continue to work on.
Yeah, the primary, and I think, it goes along the lines of small investors as well, where it's that $80,000 for $1 million investment for the legal cost piece, and it's trying to get through all of those processes to even get the application to where it needs to be. And so for small investors who want to be able to start up, not even just cooperatives, but like we're talking about our smaller investors, the $80,000 for $1 million investment is a substantial component out and a deterrent for those who are really looking at trying to start a small local rural business in agriculture, agri-processing, whatever that is. So it's just something that I wanted to flag as an opportunity to look at how we can get some more local Albertans investing in some local community projects. If we go to performance measure 3, I'm going to be kind. We're going to go through each performance measure in order. So now we're moving down the page on page 10. Page 10, outcome measure 3.3, implementing programs to mitigate risk for food safety, animal, and human health. So This is going to give you an opportunity to talk about the great investment that you did at the U of C. But veterinary services. We see an increase in vet training through the investment at the U of C veterinary medicine program. The program's going to take 3 years. What is the government doing now to ensure animal welfare when it comes to big animal veterinary services? Currently, we obviously know there's a big vacancy rate, and we've heard from people within the industry that they feel that we are getting to a point where it is becoming an animal welfare issue. I'm sure you are aware of this. Can you speak to strategies that you may be putting in place in the interim prior to these seats being available at the U of C?
Yes, no, thank you for the question, and you're definitely not wrong. There's a acute shortage of large animal vets, and that's why you saw the substantial investment in the U of C. I would say, so that investment is one piece. So the hope with that investment is to go from 50 seats to 100 seats, and a lot of that money is targeted at capital growth to make room for the spaces. It's not under my department specifically, but that is only kind of one prong of a multi-prong approach that JEI in conjunction with labor will undertake. There's the opportunity for recruitment from Europe, so there's going to be a targeted recruitment campaign. There's some opportunities that have arisen due to Brexit, where they find that there's potentially a lot of large animal vets in Europe looking for a place to come. So there is more than just that big U of C investment. Also, I would just comment on the in our side, we do what we can under the Animal Health Act, through the Canadian Ag Partnership. We're looking at things from BSE to African swine fever. We're trying to protect the food chain from all of these perils, and we work with the vet association as we can, and right down to our ag service boards and ag societies. So it's not an acute answer, but we don't really have an acute lever.
Okay. Continuing on then, looking at trying to keep young working people in rural Alberta. I mean, this is part of that. How do we keep large animal vets and working in rural Alberta? How do we encourage them to be in rural Alberta? Part of the concern that came out is that although there's been investment for post-secondary education, there's been concerns that some of that's not going to focus on the old college, Lakeland College, in the areas of agriculture and research and extension. I guess the concern I would have is when we're looking at rural economic development, encouraging post-secondary students to be educated in their local colleges and universities and then working in those local communities. Has there been any conversations that you've had to look at how we can encourage young people to continue to live, learn, and play in those rural communities so that we're not having an exodus to the urban communities?
Lots of conversation, and I don't have a specific line item to this in these budgets. Specifically about Lakeland or Olds, I think you'd have to ask the Minister of Advanced Ed. We do partner through ARDAR on different funding announcements to Olds and Lakeland. But yeah, if you're just talking broadly about keeping kids in their communities, I think that needs to be a lens that's used, whether it's education, post-secondary, or otherwise. Right up into healthcare. We need opportunities for people to live and apprentice and intern in their rural communities with the hope that they can stay in them and serve their communities later. So I'm in violent agreement.
Well, thank you, Minister. Let's move on to supply chain strategies. So performance metrics 1.B, value of Alberta's primary agricultural commodities and value-added agricultural production exports. So obviously the exports of our commodity is really the lifeline of our markets. We obviously have seen what can happen if our border crossings are closed and the significant rural impact that can have on many of our agricultural producers. We also know that there's a potential issue that's going to be happening with rail cars. We've also heard the Premier, as of late, starting to talk about moving oil and trying to expand that given the issues that are happening with Russia and Ukraine. And so my concern would be is how are you going to ensure, or how is the department going to ensure that there's no delay in being able to, one, export our commodity, but also ensure that feed and all the things that need to be getting into the province to support our farmers and ranchers is happening through the supply chain and that that's not being disrupted or impacted?
Great question. I think I'll start with the rail because we do know we have a potential labor issue with CP Rail. So, you know, this is largely an advocacy position that it puts us and our department in. So we've spoke to federal ministers of labor and transportation and agriculture, and my deputy's been on the phone with their deputy all week. We get updates daily now from their department, but the situation is critical. If CP does have a work stoppage, we think there's only about 6 days grace right now in bringing corn into Alberta. And after the drought, it's a situation we've never been in where we're almost entirely reliant on U.S. corn. There's no grain to be found, no matter what the price is. So it definitely does highlight that. Yes, the Coots blockade that you mentioned also definitely highlighted having one main port with veterinary services. So all these things, the floods in BC. You know, we have other rail constraints for the other side of this industry, the pulp and paper in the north. So I think it's going to be a lens that we're going to have to look through broadly as elected representatives when we're trying to deal with some of these situations and maybe focus some of our infrastructure resources on trying to make more areas of egress, whether it's for forestry or ag products. I know, like the Highway 3 twinning project, you know, that's very supportive of that kind of thinking, creating more opportunities to move projects, and maybe we need to be discussing with our provincial counterparts more regularly and thinking a little bigger, whether it's about the corridor task force that was being undertaken, working with our American and Canadian partners.
Sorry to interrupt, Minister. That includes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We'll now move on to the independent member for 20 minutes of questions. Would you like to go back and forth with the Minister?
Please, if it's okay, Minister.
Of course, yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Barnes.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister Horner, and thanks to you and all your staff for the work you do for Albertans in agriculture. It's more than appreciated. My first question is on the budget and page 11. And to be frank, I'm having trouble getting confidence in your numbers. Last year, your department in 2021-22 budget asked the taxpayer, asked the contributor of Alberta for $35 million was your estimate. You ended up needing $2.7 billion. And I'm right at your net operating results. So, I mean, that's a huge turnaround. And when you look at the numbers, okay, it's lion's share by miles is explained in the insurance payout. Your budget estimate was $403 million, and you ended up paying almost $2.9 billion out. We know about the drought, we know about the feed shortage rather, and all those things. But when I look at 2 years ago, 2021, insurance payouts were $850 million. And I'm right in the middle of your expenses on page 11. And you've budgeted every year for $403, $404, and $405 million in insurance payouts. But a simple average of what you've actually had to pay out each of the last 2 years, you know, we're somewhere around $2 billion. So Minister Horner, how confident are you that a year from now we won't be sitting here asking for another $2 billion of extra taxpayer money?
No, thank you, Emily Barnes. So I think what's important to understand here, I'm sitting beside the CEO of AFSC. You know, this was a 1 in 20 year event, and you mentioned the taxpayer funds. The premium pot is subsidized by the federal government and the provincial government, but that 2.7 million came from the fund, so that the fund did its job. The money was there and it paid it down. And there's still 600 million in that fund. It was 3.3 billion in total. So the other piece of that, there's another 150 million in that 2.849. It's the rest of the programs, ag stability and livestock price insurance and agri-invest and the rest of that BRM suite. But yeah, 2.7 billion paid down from 3.3 billion. The question about our budget and the estimate moving forward, this is the way that it's been done, and I wish you could see far enough back into the years where there's no payment or it's going the other direction. It would tell a different story, but it represents kind of 10-year, decade-long rolling averages, and maybe it will come up substantially in the years that come. But this is the format that we follow for now.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, there was a lot of great years down south where yields were great and grass was good, and I know for sure it wasn't necessary. But what happens if you go past the 600 million? What if you need to spend all the fund next year?
Well, so it's important to, when you picture the fund, so picture the 600 million that we have that's carryover. Now we're going to build the premium pie, so to speak, for this upcoming year. And it's split 36, 24, 40. So 36% from the federal government, 24% from the provincial government, and 40% from the producer. So we're seeing right now a 10% premium rate adjustment built in the formula, and that's going to be paid by the federal government, the provincial government, and the farmer. And that is meant to grow the fund. So we're in a period now of fund growth, and that's, you know, it goes back to actuarial principles of insurance and fund management.
Okay, thank you for that. Key objective 2.3, expand irrigation infrastructure to increase crop production to support Alberta's economic recovery plan. Don't have to tell you or anyone about the value of irrigation just in southern Alberta, where you know it is added to more people being able to stay in our communities. Quarters of land selling for upwards of $2 million, and the production, and of course those 3 potato plants are wonderful for our southern communities. So I'm wondering, Minister, like, you know, even I understand the St. Mary's Irrigation District has sold out all their water rights, and I know we've talked briefly in the past about some good projects going on in the Acadia Valley area and that kind of thing, and I just would like to hear for a minute or two, if you don't mind, please, the money that you have that's targeted for developing new irrigation opportunities, and what's most important in your mind?
No, thank you. Very big proponent and believer in irrigation. I think important to understand that the irrigation investment that we're speaking about here, the 933 million, it's a 3-way partnership between the provincial government, our current irrigation districts, and the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So the provincial government came in for 30%, the irrigation district, the individual irrigation district, came in for 20%, and then they borrowed the other 50% from the Canada Infrastructure Bank for 35 years at 1% interest. And they're very excited to do that, especially with the prospects of interest rising. So that's the 933 million that we're speaking about now. I would also like to add that, you know, that there's 13 irrigation districts currently in Alberta. 10 of the 13 are participating in that 933 million. So not all. They all had the opportunity. Maybe some didn't have the potential projects in their area or weren't able. But they're all very excited about the opportunity. It's the biggest investment in irrigation infrastructure since the 50s or ever. And the other thing that's important, you mentioned that there's no allocation left in some of those districts. All of these additional acres are made possible through efficiencies. So, you know, taking a canal and converting it to pipe, you know, siphons, different pumping techniques, low pressure pivots, drip technology. There's so many things happening that require less water per acre and less water loss. So it's quite a story, really. We're getting more bang for our buck with the same water, putting them on these value-added crops and driving this value-added industry. That's the biggest part of our you know, value proposition right now. There's no jurisdiction in North America that has 230,000 acres of new irrigation coming online like this, and people know about it, from the potato industry to sugar beet. There is potential for more irrigation in different rivers, and those studies are being done and looked at, but they're not part of this specific tranche of projects.
So the idea of looking at more irrigation opportunities is something that's on your...
Definitely, and the department, you know, they have that, the staff with that expertise. It's something that the Canada Infrastructure Bank, you know, it checks their boxes for investment opportunities. So we want to make sure that we're leaving no stone unturned and seeing what other irrigation opportunities there are in the province.
Thank you, appreciate. Key objective 3.1, support primary producers' competitiveness through reasonable resource management. I want to start there. In the State of the Union address, even President Biden mentioned concerns about too much concentration in the packing industry. I hear that all the time up here about packers and the competition, and you know, God bless them for what they do, and the opportunity to make our primary beef industry move along. But also, of course, in the feed situation this year, you would know better than me, but I understand American ranchers were subsidized quite heavily by the American government to come up to Alberta and buy feed at a time that feed was very, very scarce. And I know you're a province, you're not a sovereign jurisdiction, but what can we do to make sure that our farmers and ranchers can compete on a level playing field?
No, great questions. And yeah, I think so. In the United States, I'm going to pull some figures out of the air here, but I think the last number I read, that they're subsidized. The agriculture in the U.S. is subsidized to the tune of $90 per capita, and in Canada it's about $6 tax dollars per capita as opposed to 90. So order of magnitude difference. And I don't hear, you know, I don't hear from people wanting that. What they want is business risk management programs that work. So that's where us and the Canadian government come in and believe we need to continue and make better these robust programs that can you know, these 1 in a 20 crazy years to take that out of the equation, so people aren't going broke and can live to fight another day and plant next year's crop. You mentioned the consolidation of the packing industry. That's been much discussed here and south of the border. President Biden has even committed $1 billion in some form to try to inspire more small meat processing through the United States, and we're watching that closely. The department is here to see how that plays out.
Good.
We've entered in a joint agreement with Alberta beef producers that we help fund a study that's trying to dig into our meat processing sector specifically and see if there is any policies or levers to provide a little more transparent price discovery. But in my opinion and experience in the cattle sector, I think that there is a market, and as painful as some of these moments are, the market will flip, and great profit in one sector will drive investment to that sector. But you're definitely not wrong. 3/4 of the meat processing capacity in Canada resides in Alberta. So if you're going to have that kind of concentration and then have a shutdown, due to COVID or any other number of issues, the supply gets backed up pretty quick, and then we need to bring in programs like the set-aside program with the help of the feds and the like. But long answer to a point of the U.S. government does subsidize feed heavily, and that was another reason why we were able to pull the trigger on the agri-recovery program. For those that aren't familiar, the agri-recovery piece of the suite of programs is only usable in something that's not insurable. So a disaster situation that's uninsurable. But I think the fact that the U.S. was getting subsidized and the feed was moving south of the border was something that a lot of our industry advocates made very clear to the federal minister.
Yep. Thank you, Minister. You mentioned producers want effective risk management, and your key objective 2.1, streamline agriculture and forest sectors regulatory requirements to reduce red tape. Well, ag stability, if you don't mind, when I talk to producers, I understand it's less than 20% are still even in it. Everybody I talk to, the paperwork is onerous, the accountant bills are high, and it's kind of your flagship program, isn't it? And is it accurate that if it's only 20% of producers are in it, are you meeting your objective?
Well, I would say the insurance is definitely our flagship program, but yeah, you're not wrong. There's a lot of criticism over ag stability, and it is being discussed at the FPT table. We're currently working all departments across the prairie provinces to come up with solutions. We want something that's a little more nimble and transparent and equitable. You're not wrong. There is around 20% of producers that are using the program, which certainly sounds like a low number and is troubling. But something that I've learned to appreciate is that those 20% of producers represent nearly 60% of the cash receipts in the province. So although there's fewer using it, they are the larger, more complicated operations, namely the feeding sector. So what we have determined is that we think that we can make some changes to it to make it respond quicker. And that's part of the program. You get your taxes done, the accountant might do the work for you and send it in on your ag stability forms, but it's a backwards looking program to start with. It requires your tax information to be applied to the situation. So it's never going to be that quick. But anyways, we are looking at making changes. We're meeting in June, and in the longer term, continue to work towards 2028 policy framework of whole farm insurance or margin insurance. But that is quite a task as well.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Switching gears a bit in the time I have left, the rural economic development. Large parts of Cypress County, large parts of rural Alberta still do not have good cellular connectivity. Is that a goal of that half of your department? Is that somewhere? Is there money somewhere in this budget for that?
There isn't money in this budget for it, but I would tell you that we heard that loud and clear in our engagement. It's something that a conversation that I've had with the Minister of Service Alberta. We're quite excited about the broadband strategy, and I think we should be. It was the number one ask of the Rural Municipalities Association. It was the number one thing we heard during our engagement sessions. But then we kept hearing, well, geez, internet, I would love it if my cell phone worked. Like, let's start there first. So I think he's hearing that loud and clear, and it's something we'll have to address going forward.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned border crossings a short time ago, and of course it's well known that Alberta only has the one custom port with the U.S. The Wild Horse border crossing south of Medicine Hat is in my constituency, and grateful to be elected for 10 years, but it's been talked about for 20 or 25 years. And Minister, I think what the issue is, very, very important for our agriculture producers to have that border, a custom border, and more access. Very, very important to have some road work done on the Canadian side so things would be safe, things could be streamlined. But it's been frustrating that, we always get, it's two layers of government. It's the province that needs to do the roads and the province that needs to push it because, it's your departments, but it's the federal government that's responsible for turning that into a custom port. And my understanding, my belief is it needs to be a custom port because if you export something into America through a non-custom port, it can only go 150 miles. So there's not much 150 miles south of Wildhorse. So I guess what I'm asking, would your department advocate with the federal government to someday have the federal government turn that into a custom port, a commercial custom port, and them put in their necessary infrastructure so we could enhance that?
Well, I don't think we have too much to comment specifically, other than I'd be happy to have that conversation going forward. Obviously need some relationships with our U.S. counterparts as well. Something that was made very clear when discussing anything at the border is that there's a lot of different players. So a lot of our job during the border issues, we're trying to get all those people in one room, whether it was CFIA, USDA, border services on both sides of the border, to try to make sure everyone knew what was expected of everyone. But happy to take the advocacy forward and can see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I absolutely believe that that's the necessary first step is the feds to make that happen, or for the rest of it, we're just wasting our time. Debt servicing costs on page 11. You have estimate $64 million. Now, I remember in the past from AFSC and some of the lending going on and some concern that about lending practices outside agriculture, outside farmland, and into some of more hospitality industry and those kind of things. One of the real strengths about low interest rates right now in the positive banking environment is it seems like almost every credit union or bank I talk to wants to lend a lot of money to agriculture land. But I'm wondering, has AFSC, have you guys looked at how much of that debt servicing costs? What kind of losses are you having in the hospitality industry with any of those loans? Is that still an issue?
Well, I would comment on the numbers you referenced first. So on page 11 on the debt servicing costs, from 70 million in budget 21-22 to 64 million in 22-23, and that was mostly due to some changes in short to long term borrowing that is providing more savings to AFSC. I'm not too familiar with the hospitality portfolio of AFSC, and if you want that detail, I will ask Daryl to supplement. But I would say that AFSC's primary goals are around primary agriculture, agri-value agriculture.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the first portion of the questions from independent members. We will now move to the Government Caucus for 20 minutes of questions from the members. Would you like to combine your time with the Minister, going back and forth? And then, as soon as the Government Caucus has finished their 20-minute block, we'll take a quick 5-minute break. So go ahead, Member Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the Minister and all the officers for the Ministry for being with us today. And I appreciate all the work being done by the Ministry that supports Alberta's economic recovery. And on page 7 of the Ministry's business plan explains that the Agriculture, Forestry and Rural Economic Development Ministry works towards the growth, diversification, sustainability and innovation in the agriculture sector. In fact, page 7 of the business plan explains that the Ministry is agriculture sector.
No, great question. Yeah, so RDR, results-driven agriculture research, we're funding them to the tune of 37 million annually. It's a 10-year agreement. How it serves agriculture and the ag community, I think it's extremely important. As the member opposite mentioned in earlier questions, there's an amount of boots on the ground help in agriculture communities through applied research associations and the like. But there's also the way ARDAR is set up. You have industry groups, whether it's wheat and barley or the beef producers or the beekeepers. They get together. They have their meetings, have discussions, and put forward resolutions about what they'd like to pursue. And then they go to ARDAR and make their pitch. And the team at ARDAR, although I haven't met them all, they come from industry as well, and they've led and been a big part in discussions on these industry groups for years. So it facilitates a broader discussion about where the research dollars of the province should go, how they should be divvied up, what will provide the best results for both Alberta's ag community, farmers and ranchers, and also the communities that they serve. So they look for things like enhanced productivity, profitability, competitiveness, sustainability, responsible agricultural production, market demands, food safety, quality, value-added products, and diversification, and then that extension and knowledge piece, largely through that relationship with the applied research associations. I'd also say that the ARDAR itself, something that should probably brag about a little here, now that they're an up and running organization. They were able to facilitate or to receive $33 million in funding through the federal government, which should provide them a lot of flexibility in what they pursue. I know they're quite tickled. It was 1/6 of the total pot that they were able to bring to Alberta, and it's unclear if Alberta would have been able to get that much had ARDAR not been in place. It was a perfect vehicle for those funds to go towards, with the federal ag minister knowing that they would be divvied up accordingly. And those funds are targeted at an environmentally specific lens. We talk a lot about emissions in fertilizer right now. So, pursuits of applying fertilizer in different ways, best management practices, the 4 Rs. So it's a good news story, but definitely serves producers and their communities.
Thanks for the answer. And how does agriculture research benefit farmers and ranchers in Alberta?
How does it serve farmers and ranchers in Alberta?
Yeah, how does agricultural research benefit farmers?
No, it's a good question. I think if you look at take the beef and the wheat and barley guys, they take forward their proposal, a resolution from their team, their industry group, about the kind of research they want to see done. So you have the producers that make up these groups. If I'm a farmer that's heavily invested and passionate about growing barley, this is the industry group that represents me, and they're going to have those discussions about the kind of research they want to see done. Maybe it's around plant genetics, maybe it's around application techniques for fertilizer or different best management practices. They put those proposals forward to ARDAR, and then ARDAR funds them. So I could give you a few examples if you'd like. They invested $160,000 in Lethbridge College project to ensure increased profitability by improving grain storage. So that's one example of the finding efficiencies for the farming community around grain storage, which it'll help the entire community, and it goes across the board, whether it's water management or soil improving soil conditions. So it's a whole gamut.
Thank you, Minister. And on page 40 of the estimates, other revenue has decreased $243,000 since the last budget. Can you explain the reason for this decrease?
Page 40, just bear with me 1 second here.
No problem.
Decrease 200,000. Okay, so yeah, decrease of $200,000, I see it now. So this is a decreased revenue from, I guess it would be industry participating in research before we moved it to ARDAR. So industry would have been participating, providing their level of funding to participate, sometimes in conjunction with post-secondary institution, to promote the type of research they wanted to see. Now that won't be necessary. You know, ARDA will handle that. We've kind of gotten government out of the middle of that scenario, I guess. And I would say another comment, you know, I don't think that that's the intent of agricultural research is as a revenue line for this department.
Thank you, Minister. And does results-driven agriculture research now receive the revenue lost under the line item? If so, how does you justify this research model when government is losing revenue as a result?
Yeah, I would kind of say that kind of like the last answer I gave. You know, I don't think that it's you know, we're not looking to ag research to really run a revenue line for us. This was industry participating with post-secondary to you know, push forward their initiative. That won't be necessary now with ARDAR. We fund ARDAR. ARDAR's leveraging that with the federal government, working on their relationships with extension through our applied research associations. So it's, yeah, we've taken government out of the equation.
Thank you, Minister, for answering my questions. It's great to know the initiatives, expected achievements, and long-term sustainability in the agriculture, research, and at the same time, information. And Mr. Chair, I now pass this time to my colleague, Member Gatson.
Go ahead, Mr. Getson.
Yes, thank you, Minister. And again, it's always a pleasure, and it's great to see you in that chair over there. You're doing extremely well, sir. So really appreciate your efforts and your staff, and considering that you also have rural ec dev underneath the portfolio, so it's pretty exciting to see. I'm going to jump in on page 34. I think we started to talk about insurance on the agriculture, the insurance and lending assistance. The item, their budget line item 5.2 says it's increased by $30 million. So two-part question, Minister. Can the Minister explain what accounts for such increases, and how are the farmers going to benefit from those funds?
Yes, thanks, Emily Getson. So we're looking at page 34, line item 5.2, insurance.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we're seeing an increase of roughly $30 million. This speaks to the increase in the premium across the board. So the farmers are paying more. So are both levels of government. So this speaks to growing the premium pie, as we discussed, because we're in that fund building time now that we've depleted it the way we have. But the lending assistance line, and I do believe you mentioned lending assistance, it's in line 5.1. And you'll see that it's discontinued. I know this isn't the question you asked, but I'm going to take the opportunity because I think it's a good news story, is that AFSC's lending no longer requires assistance. They're fully self-sustaining, and that line item will probably be discontinued in the future. So I think that speaks to the good work that they're doing.
I appreciate that. Any efficiencies we can find, all about that. Page 33, and the estimates of the forest stewardship and trade budget. Item provides policy, regulates compliance to support competitive forest industry, enhancing environmental and social forest values. It's also responsible for the operations planning, reforestation, and of course that dang pine beetle that's wiping out our pine trees. Budget line item 6.2 has an increase of about $6.9 million there, back in the napkin, for forest stewardship and trade. So three-part question again, Minister. Can you elaborate on the programs? Can you also explain why such an increase was necessary?
Yes, thank you. So the increase is just shy of $7 million. That does reflect adjustments to the mountain pine beetle program to align with project timelines and priorities to manage the beetle infestations. The increase reflects adjusted spending in 22-23 of the overall. It was a three-year, $60 million a federal mountain pine beetle funding arrangement. And it's also, we have Saskatchewan as a, albeit much smaller partner, but they've gotten in as well. Just they would not like to see the beetle come across their border in as big a way. But by all accounts, the program's very successful and is actually creating opportunities for the forest sector. So it's good all around.
Okay, and just back on the pine beetle, so I get to go up in the plane every once in a while and fly over that area. It's in those valleys there, it's getting pretty tight. I mean, both from a forest fire fighting issue and then also utilizing that material. I believe a while back, just a bit of an aside, somebody had marketed that lumber that came off over to the Japanese as denim lumber because it had blue streaks in it. Oh, I know, it's pretty fun. So as long as you harvest it within the first 3 years, you can kind of make use of that. So just leading into that, I know it's become a real problem. We're talking about Saskatchewan even weighing in. Anything in specifics that we're targeting on that, Minister, to try to make use of that content, that fiber, before it's literally goes up in smoke?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's a big part of the strategy. Whether it's trees damaged by mountain pine beetle or trees that have had a fire roll through and are burnt or partially burnt. The secure access to fiber plan, the forestry management agreements. There's places in there for accelerated cut, and that can apply to either mountain pine beetle or forest damaged fiber. And that just makes sense. Move it up, get it now. I know I haven't been in too many mills in the province yet, but I did have the opportunity to be in one at Lacrete, and they were on year 2 of going through burnt lumber. They said they desperately were ready to cut some green wood, but they were appreciative and saw the value of the province of being able to move up and do that.
Okay, and then the other one that's always an interesting thing and difficult to forecast, similarly to rain, is the forest fire management. So page 34, line item 6.1, I believe, it's maintaining the same amount of 2.1 million towards the wildfire management. So can you explain what the initiatives are funded? And then also, can you speak to why is the same amount of funding been kept?
No, thank you. So I'm looking at wildfire management 6.1. So we're budgeted for 101 million, and we're still at 101 million. There's about a $600,000 increase. So the budget it increased by 2.1 million regarding capital investment, and then decreased by almost the same amount due to a transfer from capital investment for wildfire information management technology. So just some slight changes in the budget. I think there was some of this information management technology that was being added to the lookout tower system, and just trying to incorporate technology in different ways. And then, although there is a capital cost, it does provide some operational relief going forward.
Okay, and I'm going to lead you into this one. So that funding, how does it ensure successful wildlife management? I know in our area, I'm going to give a plug out to the folks that are running those drones and looking at new innovative ways, so really appreciate that. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit, Minister, because it's a really good news story for folks out there that may not have heard the integration between rural dev, aerospace, and then wildfire management.
No, thank you for the question. And I think before I get into that specific area, I'd just say, there's a wide acknowledgement that technology is going to need to play a bigger role in forest fire management. I know my colleagues that have traveled south and spoke to, the American representatives on Penwar have made clear that those jurisdictions are going all in on technology, whether it's California is using drones to actively fight the fire in different ways, but they just see that these costs are so large and hard to budget. Obviously, that's why it comes out of contingency. So I think there's just a real desire to take our fire management initiatives to the next level. So you mentioned the drone project in your community. Very, very exciting, and we're not at the level where we're trying to fight the fire with them, but we're trying to manage the fire. We're trying to monitor the fire, it's one thing if you have to get in a helicopter, wait for daylight, get up and go map and manage the fire. Or if you can have drones flying all night, mapping, sending it back to headquarters in real time, seeing where the fire's moving. You're so much more prepared in the morning, not to mention the obvious efficiencies and costs that will be saved over time from less helicopter flights and more time being saved. So it's an initiative that we really want to undertake, and not to mention specific company, but some of the technology that's being used to fly at night and to get that through Transport Canada. You definitely need to have be working with those federal partners, but some cutting edge technology that allows them to autonomously fly themselves at night, change flight path if there's something in its path. Amazing. So we're really looking forward to see how that can lead to cost savings and help keep our community safe.
No, I appreciate that, Minister. I'm going to throw you one off the hand here too. I think the other member had started to talk about logistics as well. So with Rural Ec Dev, through that Economic Corridors Task Force, really appreciate that. And we'll probably swing back, if I have any time left, to talk about irrigation, how that ties together. But just simply on those short line rails and some of the logistic challenges. And if you wouldn't mind just embellishing a bit of what you're looking at, specifically how OIN and Foremost have kind of been working that solution and then trying to bring up some of the value add ag. What are you seeing from the Rural Ec Dev side? Is there potential for expanding that a bit more and helping out our overall supply chain?
I think definitely, and those groups are really punching above their weight, and we need to collaborate with them and help facilitate conversations and introduce them to the right people. But they're doing it. You mentioned OIN, that's a partnering company between two municipalities. I think they've just been able to sell it, but they're doing that for us. They're working on these supply chains. Otherwise, these little legs, rail legs and spurs would have already been gone. So yeah, we need to see that as an opportunity for rural economic development. You mentioned the work on the Corridors Task Force. We need to continue to get all those people in the room. One thing that comes to mind is just getting transportation, infrastructure, energy in line with these municipal groups to have these conversations. But comes back to this whole collaboration thing. It's the only way to have rural economic development, or nothing will get done.
Yeah, and one prior life too, Minister, just as a comment, so when we started looking at different areas and regions, and you were very wise to say that, stop looking at the micro level, look at the macro level. So we're kind of flush with water up in this end of the country, you're kind of dry down there. So when we start looking at pulp and paper, potentially using some of that effluent water, using that for irrigation. So maybe you can mention on this one, the one-time investment for the irrigation upgrade. Do you see that just stopping at a one-time investment, or is it we're growing out our infrastructure to make sure we move resources from one region to the next to grow the other side?
Well, I don't want to comment about interbasin transfers because that's beyond my scope here, but I would say that,
The good thing with that water, it doesn't count as interbasin transfers.
Well, fair enough. We'll take that conversation offline, but I would say that no, we're not done. This was just the first round, using the irrigation districts as they exist.
Thank you, Minister. We'll take a quick 5-minute break and then come right back into the official opposition for 10 minutes. unless you would like to combine your time with the minister if he's in
Still want to go
agreement.
back and forth?
Whatever you would like.
We're good to go
Right.
back and forth.
10 minutes, go ahead, member.
Thank you. Minister, I'd like to focus again on key objective 1A, page 9 of the business plan, and as well as page 19 of the strategic plan, again about supporting economic growth and recovery in Alberta. The RAMP study, which is the study that has been done by the EMRB, so the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board. The characteristics of agriculture in the region illustrate the importance of agriculture and the agri-food sector to the regional economy. The Edmonton Municipal Regional Board has determined that the potential exists to grow the agri-food sector and increase its contributions to the regional economy. The Economic Imperative Report identified, so the RAMP report, the opportunity for the region to achieve significant growth and value-added production of agricultural products, growing the size of the agri-food sector in the regional economy. The ratio of farm gate sales to value-add agricultural production sales in the region has historically been 1-on-1. With a focus on investing in value-added production, the potential exists to increase the ratio of value-added production to 2-to-1 and even 3-to-1 for agricultural products. The EMR Economic Imperative for Agriculture in 2019 report, total directive economic output for the agriculture sector in the region had the potential to be more than double in the terms of the GDP for a combined farm gate sale and food and beverage of 11.42 billion in 2021 with an estimated 27 billion by 2046. The members of RAMP, Parkland County, City of Edmonton, my area, Sturgeon County, Town of Morinville, City of Beaumont, Strathcona County, and Global Edmonton. I guess my question is have you been looking at the RAMP study and have you been working in collaboration with these regional partners to look at the potential for agri-food? We know with the City of Edmonton Airport as well, the ability to do that export is obviously there. And then, of course, the fact that in the city of Leduc, they also have the value-added production component and research. So just curious if you can maybe update us on what that looks like for those surrounding communities.
No, thank you, and great question. And I know I've met with groups like Edmonton Global and met with the group at the airport. Amazing work that they're doing there. Love their regional focus, and it's a very collaborative approach to attracting investment and showing their strengths. We have some members on our side that are always keeping me well aware of what's going on too, and making sure we know that they hunt as a pack and do that work together. But yeah, it speaks volumes for the area, for the region. And it does speak to the collaborative approach that we're trying to take through our department. That's a specific region that has a lot to offer, and I think I know when we talk about the groups that are in our ag tracker and the potential investment that's out there, there's no secret. A lot of it is focused at this area for a lot of different reasons. You mentioned the facility at Leduc that's doing great things with startups and research. The accessibility to labor, the cheap or availability of natural gas feedstock with proximity to the heartland. This area is doing amazing things. But overall, the study speaks to what we're doing with our ag value-added sector strategy. We think we have some different advantages in the south. We've mentioned the irrigation quite a bit tonight to bring on more of those value-added crops, and you need to find some kind of mass concentration to bring those groups in with close enough accessibility to labor. We also mentioned the extra money in the rural stream at JEI for the Investment and Growth Fund. That has rural in it, but one thing that we're finding, it is tough to have a processing facility without that access to labor. It won't be in the middle of nowhere. It'll be with some proximity to labor, and it's another strength for the group that you're speaking of.
Well, thank you, Minister. And, I do want to acknowledge and highlight the fact that I think that there is a ton of potential within the area around Edmonton when it comes specifically to agriculture. And I think as much as I appreciate the heartland industry and the oil and gas and the value add that comes out of that industry, I think ignoring the agricultural potential and not being able to look at this study and really leverage the information and the potential that they've offered would probably be a detriment to the value added production that can be happening around this area. Now, I would like to go to mental health, and though I appreciate that the member is probably going to say it's under health, rural programming and agricultural societies is part of the component that is part of your mandate. Now, agricultural societies have spoken about the fact that they are the hubs of our communities, and many of them believe that they actually could be areas that could help support and advocate for the mental health supports within the agriculture industry. Now, as you know, obviously it was a tough year last year with the drought, and there are concerns again about what's going to happen this year. The mental health of the farmers and ranchers needs to be considered as part of their mental health supports, specific to industry. And so, as you know, I'm sure you're aware, the Do More Ag Foundation has been advocating for quite a long time to be able to ensure that there are agricultural specific supports for ranchers and farmers and ranchers. So I guess my question is that I did, and I have asked on a few occasions that we implement a 24/7 mental health line that is established specifically for the agriculture industry. I think agricultural societies have also recommended and said that they'd be willing to be a conduit for in-person supports. And I believe that that could happen under your rural programming line item. So my question again is that, is there any willingness from your ministry or your government to look at working with Do More Ag Foundation or any other organization to ensure that we have those mental health supports for ranchers and farmers and ranchers?
No, well, I would start by saying, there's lots of distress and concern in rural Alberta. We had a tough year, tough year, and COVID. COVID's been tough on everyone's mental health, and then the drought and everything else for our rural communities has led to a lot of hardship and distress. I would say that we are doing things. We do have an associate minister of mental health and addictions. I have ongoing conversations with him and his staff, looking at potential gaps in rural Alberta. We do not want to create a new kingdom in this department for mental health specifically, but we do, through our grant programs, provide opportunities to different groups, whether it's ag safe or on our education side with ag in schools that can handle some of this work. In spring 2021, government granted Applied Research and Extension Council of Alberta funding came from Labor and Immigration for mental health awareness and education initiative ongoing to March 2023, and they're partnering with Ag Safe Alberta to deliver in the know. There is things that are happening. I know the rural municipalities I talked to were proponents of a one call number with the federal counterparts. So it's discussions that we're having. We continue to monitor what Ontario is doing with their pilot program. Little bit different logistically than Alberta. Just have to look at our province and our population and our kilometers of roads. So a lot of the work's being done. It's not being done from our department, but we'll continue to have those conversations. It's very, very important stuff. So however we can help, we will.
Yeah, and I think, given the motion that was put forward by the Rural Municipalities Association, obviously it is something that has been identified by many, municipalities, specifically in regards to the importance of it. And the fact that, I appreciate that distance is an issue, and being able to access a counselor or a mental health support person in a smaller community may not be something that is accessible. And of course, that's why trying to develop a phone line or some way that farmers can have that conversation and have that confidentiality, because I think that was something that came up in conversations that I had, is that you don't always want your neighbor to know what's going on. And so, I would like to encourage the government to continue to look at a way to deliver that program and that support to our farmers and ranchers so that they are.
Thank you, members. We will now move on to the independent member, Mr. Lowen. You have 5 minutes of questions and 5 response from the minister, unless you'd like to go back and forth with the minister. If he's okay. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Minister, for being here, and thank you to the staff, too, for being here. It's good to see everyone here and be able to ask some questions and have some questions answered, too. I'll jump right into it, and I'll start with, I guess, one of my favorite topics is bees. And obviously, I represent the honey capital of Canada, Flair, and it's, I guess, a little personal for me, too. I have a few bees myself, and so I enjoy that those activities. But, of course, there's always issues in all of our agriculture issues and industries, and the bee industry is no different. Obviously, it's important for honey production. It's important for pollination, in our canola crops and things like that, too. So I just want to start on page 9 of the business plan. Outcome 1, key objective 1.1, and that it says to provide trade services and prevent market disruptions. And it's been exacerbated with COVID, but it's always been a problem getting bee packages to replace bees that don't survive the winter. Presently, most of the bees come, the bee packages come from New Zealand, but a lot of the queens come from California. And it's been lobbied fairly hard within the Alberta bee industry to be able to bring bee packages in from California. So presently, of course, we can bring the queens in. The queens will have 3 or 4 or 5 bees with it, and we bring them in by the tens of thousands. And but there is an issue with bringing them across the border, especially on the federal end with CFIA, and that's been an issue for quite a while. I don't think we brought in bee packages into Alberta or into Canada from California for maybe 20 or 30 years, and there was, I think, during the Klein era, that's when it changed, so we could bring queens in. And I think if we're bringing tens of thousands of queens with the attendant bees with them, I don't know if we're that far off with bringing packages in as far as the numbers of bees. I'm not sure the difference. The area of California we bring them in from is certified to be able to produce bees for import to Canada, and I'm not sure why we can't import the packages. And now might be the time to maybe work with the federal government and see if we can get that to happen. Every winter we have these issues, and when we have large numbers of die-offs of bees, then of course that creates an issue. So I guess I'd just maybe have your comments on that, and you can keep them as short as you want if you want to do a little work with that. But again, keeping in with the key objectives and to provide trade services and prevent market disruptions, obviously this would be an opportunity to work on that key objective. So I just wanted to hear your comments on that, if I could, please.
Thank you, Emily Lowen, and I know you're passionate about this. I would say, I think you have some more questions. I won't take too much time. I would just say I know the previous minister raised this to CFIA through a letter. I was just whispering to my deputy here while you're asking the question, and something we could probably pursue would be at the FPT table with the federal ag minister. I have discussions upcoming with her. Happy to do that, and maybe we'll take it offline and can recreate some advocacy letters together. But I would say I am proud that the beekeepers got in the Canada-Alberta Feed Assistance Program, because the few beekeepers I met made it quite clear that there was a severe shortage in their industry as well, something that I was unaware of prior to being in this chair. So okay. I am learning.
Okay, perfect. No, thanks a lot, Minister. Appreciate that. And again on page 10, business plan, outcome 2, key objective 2.2, it talks about insurance for the industry. And that's another issue with the bee industry, is the guidelines don't seem to be producer friendly as far as the timelines to be able to apply for insurance. So again, and maybe more of a comment than a question there, maybe encourage you to look at that and see if there's a way we could be more reactive to the bee industry and their desire to be insured like other agriculture industries. And now I'll move off of. Go ahead.
I'll just say quickly, I do have the CEO of AFSC sitting beside me, so they do offer the two programs, whether it's honey insurance or the bee overwintering. But if the guidelines are not effective or correct, they'll definitely, we hear you loud and clear, and
Okay.
sit right here.
Okay, no, that's good. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to basically the same area there, the key objective 2.2, and just a quick comment on the FSC inspectors. I understand right now the AFSC inspectors are done in southern Alberta, but of course the Peace Country is still a lot left to be done. And I think there's still a lot, even in the far north of the Peace Country in the Lacrete area. So I think presently we have probably more inspectors in the south, so it's easier to get through the southern areas first and then work to the north. And I guess what I'd like to encourage is maybe in the future we have more inspectors in the north so that the industry could be done all at the same time. The northern ones aren't waiting longer for the service than the people in the south, just to encourage that kind of fairness within across Alberta.
I guess I would just comment, I have heard this comment before. I think it was with meeting with the oat growers, had that concern, and I know I relayed that to the leadership at AFSC. They do flex their inspectors across the province. They have moved some more inspectors into the north more permanently, I would say, if that's fair to say, Daryl. But part of the desire to flex and move is just because, you know, crops are harvested at different times as you move south to north, and there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained by you know, moving in that way. But I did make the comment clear that the north felt underserved in that regard, and they said they're working to make that better. So that's fair.
That's fair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll move on to, we'll go on to forestry now. Outcome 2, key objective 2.4, and I think 3.1 also. Those deal with support socioeconomic development in rural Alberta, maintaining, enhancing rural infrastructure and realizing new economic opportunities. And then 3.1, support primary producers' competitiveness through responsible resource management. One thing that we've seen, I think, is that when it comes to when new lumber quotas come available for the industry, a lot of times what we're seeing now is existing mills in an area that would like to expand, not getting the quota next to them, and then having the lumber, the trees hauled right past their place and across our highways and to mills that are quite a ways away. And it'd be nice to see if there was some sort of process or opportunity for mills, local family mills that are operating, if they want to expand, that maybe they would have access to the timber that's right next to them, instead of seeing the timber traveling down the highways and across the bridges and beating up our highways going 100, 150 kilometers away. So just again, maybe more of a comment rather than a question, but if you wanted to respond to that, then that's...
Yeah, just briefly, I think that is a discussion that we've been had. My ADM's not at a mic with forestry, but I think he would say that that's something that comes into all these conversations, is about how you can support the little guy and show that equity of opportunity when it comes to quota or permit or any of these tools to get access to fiber. So it's not the first time we've heard it, and we're trying to make sure we move in that direction, and in a transparent way too, because obviously a lot of the other mills, or the larger mills, have dedicated staff that can fill out forms and the like. So trying to understand that, because we know how important these small family-run mills are to their communities.
Okay, thank you. I'll go on quickly on to another topic, obviously with rural economic development in your portfolio too. We're working with Service Alberta in discussions with them. Of course, they've allocated a bunch of money to be spent for rural internet and rural connectivity. And one thing I just wanted to bring to your attention too, and something I'm sure you know anyways, living in rural Alberta, as far as rural economic development, again, we talk about rural internet and connectivity and how important it is, but but also there's a large part of Alberta that you don't even have cell service, never mind internet service. So I think that's something that we should be considering as a factor of, it seems like everybody expects to have high-speed internet now, but there's some parts of our communities here in Alberta that don't even have cell phone service, never mind, high-speed internet. So just a comment.
I would just briefly comment, hear you loud and clear, and that is something that came up a lot in our engagement sessions. The rural broadband initiative is great, but there is a desire to improve the cell network across the province, and I have had that conversation with the minister and will continue to. But it's much like rural internet, some of the solutions may be different whether you're above the tree line or not.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now move on to a 10-minute block for the government caucus. Back and forth with the minister.
That work for you, Minister? Still back and forth over here?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Minister. And to my colleagues from up in Central Peace for speaking for the bees. There's lots of folks in our area too, and I know down in Spruce Grove we got bee-made honey right around the corner, so we all like our homemade product. And I am going to give a shout out to the member from Edmonton Manning for being such a great advocate, not only for her area, but for right in my area with all the counties in the backyard and everything else. So really appreciate that.
She's the best.
She's the best. And actually, on the record, she's had some great questions. There's not too many interjections from my side because they've been spot on. So really appreciate that professionalism tonight. Minister, so jumping back to irrigation, we kind of got caught off there a little bit towards the end. Looking at item 6.1 on page 34, again back into the irrigation, it's maintaining the same amount of funding, that 2.1, oops, sorry, I apologize. I looked at the wrong section here. Page 7 might make it a little bit better for everyone around there. Explains that 279.8 million are being invested between 2021 to 28 to expand the irrigation infrastructure. Can the minister elaborate on which communities will be benefiting from this initiative? And I hope when you're saying lots, not just a couple.
No, so thank you for that question. I would say, so the 279.8 million, that represents, I think if you had a calculator out and you typed 30% of 933 million, that's how you would get that number. Okay. So that's the government's portion, and that'll be allocated out over those years 2021 to 2028. It's an exciting investment, and the irrigation districts are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It's their 20% down. It's their long-term loan through CIB, who I think we're all grateful for. Sees that this checks their boxes as a sustainable investment opportunity. So quite a bit of leverage from the province's perspective. Great investment. We're in it at 30%. The communities. There's 13 existing irrigation districts. They're all in the south relatively, and there's 10 that are taking advantage of this. If you want the specific districts, I can ask for them here and read them off a piece of paper.
Well, it's evident to see to just bust out a box of crayons and come up with this on the back of a napkin, so really appreciate this.
Bow River ID, Eastern Irrigation District, Leverett Irrigation District, Lethbridge Northern Irrigation District, Raymond ID, Ross Creek ID, St. Mary's ID, Tabor ID, United ID, and Western ID. So that's all except Etna, McGrath, and Mountain View.
Appreciate it, sir. And with that, I'll cede my time over to the outstanding MLA, Tanny Yao from Fort McMurray. Well,
Thank you so much. Minister, thank you and your team for answering some questions from us. In the business plan under key objective 1.3, you talk about long-term access to sustainable and secure fiber supply, and you are also the Minister of Rural Economic Development. I'm just wondering if you have Highway 686 on your radar, which is the highway that goes between Fort McMurray and the Peace Country. It's a large swath of area that is untouched, but would allow for access to a lot of fiber, if you will. Have you discussed this with your officials? Is this on your radar?
Well, I'd say, back to our corridor conversation with MLA Getson, if those opportunities are there and make sense, it's somewhat out of the scope of my department or this conversation, but I think, if it provides, access to those communities, definitely we'll have that conversation. I would say secure fiber access, if we can circle back to that, I would say that, that's kind of the lens at which we're looking at the forestry sector, and it's not without challenges because, we've mentioned mountain pine beetle a few times, fire, obviously, potential species at risk act, the sub-regional caribou plans that are ongoing. I'm glad that we've got the first two of the plans complete at Cold Lake and Beast Shoe, but that's taken a lot of hard conversations and with the goal of having an active working landscape. Not just for forestry, but for oil and gas or any other number of industries out on the landscape to keep these communities alive. Because when the forestry sector looks at an investment, that's the best thing we can provide them is security of tenure and the confidence knowing that this government or Alberta's government wants to ensure that they have access to those trees. Very expensive investment, very expensive to capitalize these mills, so they need to know that. And I think if you look at what's happening in BC right now, some of the policy changes that they've taken, it's not surprising to see huge companies and mills like Canfor divesting in BC and buying mills in Alberta because they appreciate that perspective. From what I'm told, I don't want to brag, but it's one of the few places in the world where investments being attracted like that, coupled with the fact that we have such a sustainable forest certification. It's quite a combination for Alberta.
Thank you so much, Minister. Budget line 4.3 under your budget estimates, $400,000 increase in the funding for agricultural service boards, agencies, boards, and commissions. I thought we were under a mandate to sort of lean those up and cut the red tape. Can you just provide a quick overview of the program and the funds that this was used for? And can you explain why was this program relevant for agriculture in Alberta? And why did you decide to give them an increase, please?
So there's 69 ag service boards. The increase you're speaking of, I believe it's, I think you said 400,000. 200,000 is around the collective agreement and staffing costs, and the other 200,000 is to take over the rat control program. So that's coming into their department. I think Alberta's fortunate to have the ag service boards. There's 69 of them, and like I've said already, they do a good job liaising, municipal concerns to the province, noxious weeds. We mentioned wild boar and other pests. So I think they're an important tool for the province. So glad to see this stable funding.
Thank you so much. My last question is just a two-parter. On page 40 of the estimates, under transfers from the Government of Canada, the budget increased by $46.6 million compared to previous budget of 21-22. Boy, I thought the opposition was the Prime Minister's best friend, but I could be wrong here in Alberta. I'm just wondering, can you explain the reason for this increase?
Yeah.
Tell us more about your relationship with Justin. And I'm wondering if you could just explain this, the reason for this increase, and as well. My second question is, budget 22-23 allotted $252.5 million less than the 21-22 forecast. Can you explain that differential, please?
Okay, so for the first question, the $46 million increase from budget, $35 million of that is an increase in AFSC's funding, and that's due to the agri-insurance. So we talked about this premium increase on all levels of government. That's the increase on the federal side, the federal portion. And then there's an $11 million increase in the department's funding from the feds, and this is due to that $6.9 million increase in the mountain pine beetle program that we discussed previously, and a $4.3 million increase in funding for the Canadian Ag Partnership Program. And the reason that funding was increased is simply because the Canadian Agricultural Partnership is a 5-year arrangement, and we're in the last year. So that number we know, I think it's 35 million in a different line item, but that number we know there's a pot of money. It's around $200 million over 5 years. As the CAP grants come in and out, we're able to pull them ahead in advance if need be, if there's a lot of applications. But when you get down to the last year, obviously that's the money that's left, and we'll do everything we can not to leave any federal dollars on the table. So I'm hoping the applications are coming. And I don't have a relationship with Justin Trudeau.
No trips to the Aga Khan's Island, hey? All right, then, thank you very much. I'll allocate the rest of the time to Mr. Rain. 25 seconds for you, sir.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Minister, for being here this evening, and thank you to all your staff for joining us too. I guess I'll get right into it. On page 40 of the estimates, the expense forest increased by 7.7 million from budget 21 to 2022. Can you explain the reason for this increase?
Sorry for that. We'll have to wait till the next round. We'll now move over to the official opposition for 5 and 5 combined with the minister for a
Yep.
total of 10
I
minutes.
think we're good. Okay. Everybody's been talking about forestry and I haven't, which is shocking given my family history. So I just wanted to have a quick question in regards to, and it actually goes across the whole ministry, so agriculture and forestry, looking at supporting the reputation internationally when we look at our sustainability and environmental stewardship. Obviously, we know that we are leaders when it comes to both of those things, sustainability and environmental stewardship. When we talk about fiber access, looking at harvesting practices, I'm just wondering if you can maybe highlight some of the things that you're doing to support the industry in regards to ensuring that people understand that our forestry industry is doing all the right things to counter some of the other arguments that may be coming from other provinces.
No, great question, and I'd say that it has every conversation around forestry, whether it's our plans or our tenure agreements, it involves it's a very holistic approach. It all involves Indigenous partnerships. Acknowledgement of the utmost best practices around harvest, and I think Alberta's reputation is amazing from what I can gather from the other provinces and our forest sector. I have had this conversation at the FPT table with forest ministers, and I think it's always top of mind. One thing that's interesting when you have these different pressures, whether it's the potential for a species at risk protection order, it involves, there's less tools for the forest sector, because at the end of the day they cut down trees. It's not like the oil and gas sector that can consolidate roads or do different things, because their footprint is their footprint. So we have to manage how that footprint is, where it's going, its shape, and there's different things that we can do to help facilitate that within those agreements. But I would say we're doing a marvelous job, and not only on the environment side, but also on the value add side. We're major exporters, obviously, of raw products, but we also have a value-added initiative. There's no better way to take carbon out of the forest than to put it in trusses and lumber and put it in houses. So that's a conversation that's also ongoing. But if the trees burn, and they will if they're not harvested. That's a different carbon conversation. I think when our department looks at emissions and looks at the forest, I always thought, the forest is a big carbon sink, and it is. But in the potential for large fire, a lot of that's negated. So I think having responsible harvest techniques, really are the ultimate answer for these very slow-growing crops.
And for every one tree cut down, there are 3 to 4 planted.
Yeah, 3 last year.
Yeah. Okay. So I appreciate that. I think, again, coming from, I mean, the Pine Beetle Initiative, I'm a very big supporter of it. When we were in government, I advocated for it. I believe that initiative needs to continue. I'm curious if you've had looks at the spruce bug and whether or not we're concerned about the fact that it's moving its way from the east to the west, and if there are mitigating practices that are being considered to hopefully not have to do what we're doing with the pine beetle, which is react versus maybe be a little bit more preventative in that category. It's not here yet, but like, let's not have it come here would be ideal.
Yeah, I would say that conversations come up. We had some foresters in town just last week, and it was something they definitely wanted to make sure we were aware of. And we are. So look forward to those conversations at the first minister's table with the BC minister and the federal minister. And I should also say, back to your first question. And I just got handed this note. We do monitor annually for spruce budworm. So there you go. But I just wanted to say about the supporting our initiative and telling that story in a healthy way. The group at AFPA and their I Love Alberta Forest program, the ministry does amplify and leverage that voice best we can. So that's a healthy partnership and one we're proud to support.
And I'm glad to hear that we're monitoring the bug, because I mean, for our nurseries specifically, like it's a real concern and an issue as we look at moving, having trees coming in and out and all the things. So I'm happy to hear that. Just in regards to, because I'm running out of time, but I want to go back to some value-added borrowing. When we're looking at trying to bring investment or leverage investment that's happening in the province when it comes to value-added production. So one of the barriers that comes into place is that if you're not a bigger company, if you go to one of the big banks, your borrowing interest rate is going to be significantly higher than if you have that investment to leverage behind you. One of the questions that has come up from people who are interested in investing their capital in some of these projects is if there's a willingness from the government to look at some strategies to maybe backstop or support. It wouldn't impact your balance sheet. It was done under us with our energy efficiency programs in regards to basically guaranteeing the loan, which would help bring down the interest rate for investors. Because we do have local people who would like to invest in local economies that just aren't able to get the interest rates that make sense to make the capital investment make sense. So it's an idea, and I like to be propositional and not just adversarial. Or maybe you have some other thoughts or ideas that the ministry has been looking at that may be able to bring down some of that cost associated with just trying to do the startup.
No, I guess to comment broadly, I'd be happy to have a conversation with the finance minister in any regard about the potential for those kind of things. But I think for us as a ministry, we obviously have the Crown Corporation AFSC sitting right here that we're quite proud of the work that they are doing, and that's from the small quick turnaround loans, which participation's through the roof, obviously to the larger high limit loans. They're moving where modern agriculture and ag business has taken them. It's a lot bigger number now, being able to loan up to $30 million. That's all pretty recent, up from 15. And part of the reason we've had to up the borrowing ability of AFSC to $3.6 billion from $2.8 billion. But happy to take that with you offline about other potential tools, and much like your cooperative idea from earlier, we can flesh that out as well.
Okay, so I am flipping it a little bit. I'm kind of cleaning off some of the other questions that have come forward from different groups. When we're looking at innovation for forestry specifically, have you been having conversations or have there been, we talk a lot about innovation in the agriculture sector, right? Ag tech, the investment at the post-secondary institutions. We haven't talked a lot about post-secondary and forestry and the potential there for doing some innovation, educating, trying to get people engaged in the forestry industry and working in forestry. I guess my question to you would be, as the Minister of Forestry, how are you working in trying to leverage and engage in some of that technology and advancement that obviously we're seeing? If you go to a sawmill now, like the way that they can measure and cut and do all of those things is very, and it's changing all the time, right? If you can talk maybe about some of that innovative piece, we always talk about agriculture and innovation. We don't talk a lot about forestry.
Well, and I think probably the reason for that, an early adapter of technology, because they have to be, you know, seeing the optimization changes that have happened in the forest sector. Like I said, I'm new to this chair, but absolutely amazing. And when they come to meet with us, you know, they're not asking for help in that regard, but they're eager to tell us about all that they're doing. And you know, some real cutting edge, world leading stuff. Some of it they've brought from Europe.
Thank you, Minister. Sorry to interrupt, but we'll now move on to the government caucus for a 10-minute block, going back and forth with the Minister. To you, Mr. Rain.
Yeah, Minister, just before the break there, I was asking you about on page 40 of the estimates. The expense forest, it increased 7.7 million from budget 2021 to budget 2022. So I was asking, can you explain the reason for this increase, please?
Yes, just bear with me. I believe it's almost entirely the mountain pine beetle money that we spoke about. But yes, it is the mountain pine beetle money. So yeah, much like we said, it matches our, you know, principles of ensuring we have a sustainable forest and working with our interjurisdictional neighbors. So.
Oh, okay. That kind of ties into my next question, asking what it does for our forest. But like you say, it ties into sustainability and making sure the forest is resilient and good for generations to come.
Yeah, a lot of preventative maintenance, hopefully, but also provides economic opportunity, like we said, for that flexible cut within the forest management plans. So hopefully, getting the best value for all of Alberta and Albertans out of the forest.
All right, thank you. On page 40, under revenue, the line premiums, fees, and licenses increased by 76.5 million in this budget. Can you explain the role of Alberta's forest industry in this increase?
Yes, so I'm on that page. So yeah, it's 75 million roughly from budget to this estimate. And yeah, I think if you look at the forecast, it was forecasted at 640 million 21-22, and this is largely due to an increase in timber royalties. So we're still projecting an above average amount, but down somewhat from the highs that we saw last year. You know, there was the going joke in my community was, well, canola's over $20 a bushel, but I still can't build a deck.
Right.
Everyone saw what lumber was worth, but that line, that $76 million increase, you know, part of it's the increase in timber revenue, but the rest is an increase in AFSC's premium. So that's the other side of that coin.
Oh, okay. All right. My last question for you is kind of a two-part question. So I wanted to know, are the timber quota rates accounted for in this line of the estimates expected to follow through into the 2022-23 budget year, or does a decrease in timber royalties account for a portion of the 87.8 million decrease from this forecast?
So yes, it is accounted for, but it acknowledges the fact that they were once higher and now not as high. So the $87.8 million decrease, that number is made up of $125 million decrease in the department's timber royalties from forecast, but then added a $38 million increase in the premiums. So minus 125 plus almost 40 gives you the delta of an $87 million decrease.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to cede the rest of my time to MLA Turton. Thank you.
Yes, awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Minister, for coming out here tonight to answer the questions. I just have a couple questions. So one is specifically with the budget, and one to kind of tie in a little bit directly with my riding of Spruce Grove and Stony Plain. But to kind of kickstart us off, on page 40 of the estimates, on the Canadian Agricultural Partnership line, it shows it increased 4.3 million from budget 21 and 2022. I was just wondering if you can first of all just explain the reason for this increase.
Yeah, so I'll stand to be corrected from the department, but this is what I was speaking about in regard to the 5-year average of monies through the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. So, like I mentioned, our amount was roughly $200 million over the 5 years, but we did have some flexibility to pull it ahead or pull it back or take it forward as we saw the applications roll in. So in this instance, yeah, we budgeted for 30 last year. We forecasted 35, and saw 40 in 2020, 2021, all around there. The estimate of 35,239,000, that's an exact number because it's all the money that's left in the pot.
Okay, and I guess I was just hoping you could also explain a little bit about how this CAP funding supports a vibrant agricultural sector and its role amongst agricultural communities around the province.
For sure, yeah, no, I think it's a great program, you know, and it has a lot of different pieces to it. From on a big side, you know, the emerging opportunities grants that are available under CAP. You know, the department sees a lot of applications from across the province to a smaller set of grants around, we mentioned efficient grain handling earlier, or water quality and efficiencies, even down to youth agricultural education. So kind of the full gamut, right, from an investment attraction tool to keeping ag in our schools. But very important, and I would just list a few. So 3 programs under the growth and value added theme: value added, on farm value added, and like I mentioned, that emerging opportunities. 4 programs under the farm efficiency theme, like I mentioned: farm technology, efficient grain handling, market assurance, and water. And the youth agricultural education and food sustainability assurance. So they support a lot of different things. Right down to, you know, water management. We talked about the drought. There is grants you can apply for there to source water, whether through dugout or drill a well, something like that, to ag in our schools. It's a great program. That's why we're partnered on it.
Right on. And again, just to commend you, I know it's getting late. I know with the time change, it's tough on all of us. I know my son was asking me about what farm animal keeps the best time, and I said a watchdog. So, you know, I appreciate your answers, Minister. So I guess my last question I really want to talk about is about food processing. Many people don't know that in the amazing riding of Spruce Grove and Stony Plain, there includes a Cargill processing plant, and that actually supplies all the meat for McDonald's. A lot of people don't realize that. As well as the member from Lexington and Parkland talked about the bee-made honey processing plants. So even in urban areas like Spruce and Stony, with a total of 8 farmers, I mean, agriculture is a pretty big deal. So my question really talks about on outcome 1.4 of your business plan. It seeks to attract investment and increase value-added product development to support the agri-food sector investment and growth strategy. So, Minister, I'm just wondering if you can identify where Budget 2022 supports our food processing sector and why it's so important.
No, thank you for the question, and I appreciate your passion. And I have not got to put my eyes on the burger plant and you're riding it, but I've heard it's incredible. I think
it's a wonderful site, Minister.
Supplies all the patties to McDonald's in the province. But I would say, you know, broadly that claim is represented throughout this budget. You know, the investment attraction, the irrigation, the changes in red tape, they all speak towards, the pursuit of more viable economic opportunities and growth in the ag and value-added ag sector. The growth of primary and value-added agricultural exports to 16 billion by 2023, investment of nearly 280 million in irrigation and infrastructure, and continuing to do the work through ARDAR, the research that's going to be done with the help of the federal government and our industry groups. It's all pulling the same direction. So I think as a province, we want to recover, bring investment, and as a department and ministry, this is our focus. But I think we're well on our way, and hopefully there'll be more communities like yours that can speak about the great facilities in their riding in that regard.
No, absolutely, and thank you very much for that, Minister. I will admit, as someone that grew up in small town Saskatchewan as kind of like a weekend farm kid, most of my family are farmers out in eastern Saskatchewan, and so just knowing the type of work that you've been doing here to help support our ag industry and value-add industries is greatly appreciated. And I could speak for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, seeing both ends of the burger patty. Just seeing your efforts in supporting the ag business, especially in ridings like mine, is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, members and Minister, and the official opposition for the remaining approximately 6 minutes.
Thank you very
Back and
much.
forth.
Please.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. To the Minister and all the officials who've been here through the estimates process, thank you very much for fulsome answers, engaging with this. I've learned a lot and I appreciate your time. I agree with my colleagues across the way that the official opposition critic has asked a lot of excellent questions today. I have a few that are kind of focused on the labor side. The Alberta at Work initiative is kind of the flagship program for this government and this budget. I understand it is being led by Labor in partnership with other ministries. On page 132 of the fiscal plan, it reads, under the Alberta at Work initiative, advanced education is investing in targeted enrollment growth in specific areas to foster economic growth, including technology, veterinary medicine, agriculture, financial services, and aviation. I see the capital investment when it comes to veterinary medicine under the Alberta at Work initiative. I believe that the sentence I've read from page 132 implies that advanced education will be creating new enrollment spaces in targeted fields within agriculture. And so my question is, how is your ministry informing and influencing the Alberta at Work strategy? And do you know of the 7,000 seats, how many agriculture-related seats there might be related to this investment, or how many might be forestry?
Great question. And unfortunately, I don't have a specific number for you. Sure. It was more just our department and myself clearly outlined that there was pieces in the agricultural sciences envelope that we thought were going to be highly sought after. Mm-hmm. In some of the discussions around what we expect will be a big greenhouse boom in the province. There is a desire to make sure that those diplomas and designations are readily available. So I think that'll have to be fleshed out yet. It more speaks to the intent and direction. Other than the vet seats was very specific, but I guess the conversations will be ongoing from our department.
I'm glad to hear that your department will be working directly with the advanced education and other ministries that are involved in that. And greenhouse boom ties into my next question, which was finding out a little bit more about how your ministry might be working with the labor ministry around labor shortages and skills mismatches. Certainly we see in our regional occupational demand that there can be variation significantly in different parts of the province. And in reviewing for my labor estimates, the short-term employment forecast, I saw that there's a moderately high demand in agricultural service contractors, farm supervisors, specialized livestock workers. Can you just speak to, when it comes to labor demands in your ministry, how you might be working with the Ministry of Labor, or how you are working to address some of those challenges?
No, great question. I think we've definitely been clear about our, desires to, everything from immigration and the 2 rural streams that the immigration minister is proud to bring forward, how they might fill gaps for rural Alberta and the ag sector specifically. But also, I think, I think of our department, and I think during COVID, one of the things that we undertook during COVID was a specific ag training, a set of, training initiatives led by the department. And the need was because we were bringing in people that wanted to get out of the cities during COVID, and there was maybe a job opportunity, but they needed to first learn the vocabulary and, which end of the cow is going to chase them, so to speak. So just, getting that real basic understanding of things on a farm, right down to farm safety, it's working on the vocabulary in that relationship. That's just a small example of something we've done. But yeah, we're trying to work with labor, immigration, education, both K-12 and post-sec to really look at how we can address this need.
Thank you very much, Minister. And you mentioned farm safety. Within your budget, do you have farm safety dollars?
We usually use the CAP grants that I spoke of to help, pursue those programs, programming for, from ag safe to 4-H, try to leverage those groups that are doing the good work out there.
Perfect. And finally, I think this will be one of our last questions. When it comes to students that are graduating from programs that are related to your ministry, the question is, do you know how many new hires around wildfire firefighters are happening over the next couple of years?
New hires around wildfires. I know that our team is, there's no expectation we won't be fully staffed, but I couldn't speak to the amount that would be new hires fresh out of school, unless I maybe get it handed to me right now. 432 is our seasonal workforce, but I can get that for you if you'd like.
Great. Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you to the officials.
I apologize for the interruption, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I would like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet tomorrow, March 15th, 2022 at 9 a.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Transportation. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.